Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live joint coverage of Flight 4 of SpaceX's Starship rocket, the nearly 400-foot tall, aiming to be nearly fully reusable vehicle, which is set to launch later this morning from the Starbase facility in South Texas. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter here for Spaceflight Now. As mentioned, though, we are very much not alone with our live coverage today. As you can see at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen and from the graphics we've got on deck, this is a joint live stream between Spaceflight Now and our friends at LabPadre. We are looking forward to working with them again as we kick things off and appreciate all the hard work that they continuously put down in and around Starbase, bringing live views to all of us here on the progress of this very important rocket, not only for SpaceX, but also for NASA and the Artemis program. We'll have much more on that as we progress through the countdown. We are currently T-minus 1 hour, 39 minutes and counting. Local time is 6:11 and just a hair after Central. It is 7:11 here on the East Coast. Not a slushy to be found, but we do have some friends joining us on the stream. We'll be bringing them in just a moment. On your screen, you're looking at the Starship rocket there. Ship 29 atop booster 11, preparing for a liftoff as SpaceX has adjusted the T0 for today. They are currently targeting a liftoff at 7:50 a.m. Central, that is 8:50 a.m. Eastern, 12:50 UTC for our friends joining from around the world. SpaceX reports that weather conditions are 95% favorable for liftoff. So certainly a good weather outlook for a mid-morning flight of Starship from South Texas. It has been, of course, a very busy week in space flight, not only down here in southern Texas, but of course around the world and around the moon. This week we've seen China's Chang'e 6 mission land on the moon, retrieve samples, and head up to lunar orbit. It'll bring those samples back to Earth over the next 2 weeks. Of course, yesterday here in Florida, we saw the launch of an Atlas V rocket with Boeing Starliner spacecraft on board. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore, Sonny Williams in the capsule, currently making their way to the International Space Station as we speak. That mission currently T plus 20 hours, 20 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Rendezvous and docking with the ISS is expected at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. 16:15 UTC for our friends joining around the globe. As we go ahead and pan down on the Starship vehicle, taking a pause right here, looking at the hot staging ring. One of the different changes between Flight 3 and Flight 4, of course, is that they will be jettisoning that hot stage ring following the boostback burn. We're going to talk more about that with our panel as well. So let's go ahead and not waste any more time and bring our friends in so we can have a robust conversation. Got about an hour and a half before liftoff and a lot to talk about. So let's go around the horn and introduce the fellas. First off is very popular commentator and reporter on his YouTube channel. Marcus House joins us from the other side of the globe, and we are very glad to have him with us this morning. Someone who is very well read and well learned on the Starship program, and we're glad to have him back on the broadcast for Flight 4. Marcus, good to see you this morning, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Thanks very much for the great intro. That is, well, that's overselling me just a little bit, I think. But yeah, welcome everybody to this epic day. This is going to be as amazing as every other, I'm sure. We have all
Absolutely.
the fingers crossed. All fingers crossed.
Fingers and toes crossed and the weather cooperating. Also with us this morning, for those who are coming to us from the LabPadre side of the stream, you'll recognize the voice in the writing style of Joel. He's one of the writers for LabPadre's newsletter, also extremely well versed on all things Starbase and the Starship program. So we're very excited to welcome Joel into the stream. Joel, how are you doing this morning, sir?
Doing great. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting us here. Exciting times here. Excited to see this giant rocket take to the skies once more.
Yeah, and the turnaround between missions is just getting shorter and shorter, which, of course, is something we'll also be talking about in greater detail a little bit later on. Finally, rounding out our panel here on the live stream is Spaceflight Now alumnus and current Ars Technica space reporter, has also gotten just as few hours of sleep as we have here. It's our good friend Stephen Clark, who is also down there in South Texas, eyes on the rocket at, I believe, the Rocket Ranch is where you're watching from, right, Stephen? And good morning to you, and hope you're able to get a couple of winks before we talk to you again today. Apologies for the pause. We are just troubleshooting some audio things on our end. We're currently T-minus 1 hour, 32 minutes, 1 second and counting. Again, to the planned liftoff of Starship, which is currently set for a T0 liftoff of 7:50 a.m. Central, 8:50 a.m. Eastern. So going back around the horn, Joel, start with you since you've been down there at Starbase for some time now. Flight 4 coming just a little more than 80 days after Flight 3, and they've been ever increasing the amount of, or decreasing the number of days between flights between Flight 1 and 2 and 2 to 3, now 3 to 4. From the Starbase perspective and just the hardware readiness, for those who have not been to Starbase, kind of paint us a word picture of the pace of production and what it's like there on a more day-to-day level.
Okay. Well, full disclosure, I am not at Starbase. I've actually not been, but I watch the cameras every day. I'm pretty active in the LabPadre community and paying attention down there. And SpaceX just keeps ramping up their game with this hardware readiness. Before this flight, we've already seen the Flight 5 Starship go out and be static fired. We haven't seen the Flight 5 booster do that yet, but the Flight 5 Starship has already undergone its initial static fire testing. So, it's a good bet that we're going to see that pause between launches continue to shrink. And at the same time, on the, infrastructure side, they are, just constantly pushing forward and expanding their build facilities and their launch facilities. It is a very, very active site. And, I still can't believe how lucky we are to have the kind of access with our cameras that we do have.
Yeah, certainly. And there was, for those who've been watching the Starbase footprint closely, there was some concern because some of the cameras were moved around and there were some notices for removal, but it sounds like there have been meeting of the minds and some different approval, and they've been able to reestablish the live camera. So certainly glad that LabPadre has been able to keep its visual presence there at Starbase. It's an important component for all of us to really key into what's happening with the progress of the vehicle. Marcus, turning to you, as Joel was saying, we've already seen a static fire for the Flight 5 ship, and the pace of production seems to only really be ramping up as we continue on now to the count of Flight 4. Looking at the approval process for this, going from more of an oversight view, assuming you had a chance to take a look at what the FAA had to say about clearing Flight 4 to move forward, were you surprised at the language that was in there, the fact that there were some contingencies that the FAA okayed for the end of the mission for a ship that may allow them to turn around for Flight 5 without going through a full mishap investigation?
Oh, yeah. Look, I think this was just a really big, well, it was a great step for cutting red tape, right? So we had this great statement from the FAA. It was NASA Spaceflight managed to sort of get some extra information out that we wouldn't normally get to see, I don't think. So I don't know how they did that. But essentially what they said was that, SpaceX actually put forward 3 items. And those 3 items were to say, hey, if any of these 3 things happen, we don't consider it to be a mishap or require a mishap investigation. So the great thing is that the FAA accepted that. So in full agreement, the 3 scenarios would be that if the failure of the thermal shield during high heating, then it wouldn't require an investigation. The second would be if the flap system is unable to provide that control under the high dynamic pressure, then it wouldn't require an investigation. And last, the failure of a Raptor engine during one of the landing burns, either from the booster, presumably, or the flip landing with the ship, that shouldn't require an investigation either. And look, this makes sense because, let's face it, every vehicle, apart from SpaceX vehicles, are expended and are allowed, they're allowing the boosters to be ditched. SpaceX have ditched their second stages for Falcon 9 all this time. So, as long as it's disposed of safely, then who cares, So that's a great thing. No red tape for that. It means that they can move straight forward into Flight 5 as long as nothing else happens outside these, conditions. So this is all great. Really happy with that. And I guess the other thing that was good to see this time around is that the FAA released the launch license. I don't know, it was like 40 hours before the flight was supposed to happen, whereas last time it was actually only, 15, 16 hours when it was for Flight 3. So that was a really good thing to see as well. So they're definitely working much better together. They're definitely, having a better understanding what the vehicle is going to do, what areas are going to require more of this red tape and that sort of thing. So, yeah, happy with that.
Yeah, it certainly seems as though the FAA is getting much more familiarized and comfortable with the Starship launch vehicle, certainly, and something that we can talk more about in a moment as we bring in Stephen back into the conversation. The FAA currently is looking at approving Starship launches from Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we here at Spaceflight Now broadcast from. and they're looking at approving for up to about 44 flights annually. Imagine that cadence will probably ramp up over time. But Stephen, obviously, you're very familiar with the KSC property and what the FAA is looking to do, as well as the Department of the Air Force over on the Cape Canaveral Space Force side. And in fact, just a note before you hop in, Stephen, for folks that want to lend your voice to the conversation about Starship here at Kennedy, there will be public scoping meetings that the FAA is holding this coming week on the 12th and the 13th, as well as a virtual meeting, which I believe is on the 17th. So a number of different ways for you to get your voice heard and your thoughts on the Starship program. And they welcome not just folks that are here locally in Central Florida, but want input from all the stakeholders. So, Stephen, turning to you, obviously the operation and production of Starship here in Florida, super key not only for SpaceX, but for NASA as well, right? Can you expound on that?
That's right, Will. Yeah, NASA and SpaceX want to have multiple launch sites for the Starship. Soon they will have 2 launch pads here at Starbase to kind of ramp up the launch cadence that they can do here in Texas. And then eventually they plan 2 sites in Florida, one at Kennedy Space Center on NASA property, Pad 39A, one over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on D&D property. And I suspect we'll see the second launch tower here operational well before either launch site is operational down in Florida. I expect just based on the timing that it takes for the FAA to complete this environmental assessment and the time it'll take to actually build the structures and infrastructure, the physical property at the Cape, I suspect that it'll be probably 2 years or more before we see a Starship even on the pad, a fully stacked vehicle down in Florida. SpaceX hopes to have the second pad here operational well before then.
Yeah, certainly. And we'll have part of our conversation with Lisa Watson-Morgan, who's the head of the Human Landing System program. I know, Stephen, you had an opportunity to talk with her as well in the run-up to Flight 4. And we're going to get some of our videos ready on that in just a little bit here. Before we continue on, though, for those who are joining with us, either on the LabPadre stream or on the Spaceflight Now side of the equation, we're very much appreciative of whichever channel you're tuning into. We're both working very hard together to bring this coverage to you. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button on whichever stream you're watching. Be sure to share the stream that you're enjoying right now. And that way, more folks can find this live coverage as we continue to step on through the count in the next 1 hour, 21 minutes, 58 seconds. Also, try to give shout outs to folks that are joining with channel membership, as comes with a number of perks on both channels, which you can check out on each individual one. Last but not least, if you'd like to be a part of the conversation here on the broadcast and you have a comment or question that is appropriate to be read on the show, we'd love to cycle you in. You can use the YouTube Super Chat feature, as one of our channel members, Mel Roberts, heralded with a $10 Super Chat. Good to see you this morning, Mel, who says, another exciting day for spaceflight. Listening to Will, Marcus, Stephen, and Joel will add to the fun. And howdy to the great state of Texas, where I was born and raised. So again, we'd love to bring your voice into the commentary. And for those who are joining us now live, let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, as SpaceX has been improving and making changes to its Starship protocols. They've also been making adjustments to the fueling process of the ship upper stage and the Superheavy booster. So let's give you an overview of what we're anticipating with this flight coming up. With the adjusted T0, we're looking at things kicking off at T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes. It's when the SpaceX launch director will verify the go for propellant load. They'll take that poll, and if they're ready to proceed with that, fueling will start still on the ship upper stage, same as last time, but unlike last time where they started with liquid oxygen, This time they're beginning with liquid methane on that ship upper stage at T-minus 49 minutes. That'll be followed up 2 minutes later by that LOX load on the ship upper stage. Fueling will turn to the booster at T-minus 40 minutes with, again, liquid methane being loaded on the Superheavy booster, known as Booster 11 on this flight. 3 minutes later, LOX load will begin on the booster as well. Fast forward to T-minus 19 minutes 40 seconds. The Raptor chill down sequence begins on both the Superheavy booster and the ship upper stage. Of course, there are 33 Raptor engines designed for sea level operations on the Superheavy booster and 6 on the ship upper stage, including 3 that are designed as vacuum engines. Moving on to T-minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds, the ship propellant load wraps up. That's followed 30 seconds later by booster fueling being complete. The T-minus 30-second mark, SpaceX flight director will verify their go for launch. The flame deflector will be activated at T-minus 10 seconds. Raptor ignition sequence begins at T-minus 3 seconds. And then, of course, as SpaceX like to say, at T0, excitement is guaranteed. However, it's not until about T+2 seconds that we actually see liftoff of the Starship rocket.
Certainly very nice that we're seeing some venting going on here from the launch mount. Looks like the tower as well. So we're moving ahead. It's looking great.
Yeah, and certainly, and Joel, if you want to speak to this as well, they've been doing a lot of work on the ground side here at Starbase, especially on the tank farm. Just to Marx's point, if you're looking at the middle of the Mechazilla, as SpaceX calls it, you see venting there from the tower. Looks like they're preparing to, or they are thermally conditioning the fuel lines to begin loading both the liquid methane and the liquid oxygen on the second stage, the ship part of Starship.
Yeah, there's been some pretty significant changes here in the tank farm, the Stage 0 tank farm, as SpaceX likes to refer to their ground support infrastructure here. Since the last test flight, SpaceX, when they were first building out this pad, made these vertical cryogenic storage tanks on site. They didn't, at the time, didn't want to wait for traditional tanks to be brought in, thought they would save some space here, and made what we kind of call the Lego pad with those 8 vertical tanks stacked there. And really pretty quickly ran into some problems there regulatory wise, because their 2 methane tanks were too close to everything else, didn't have a wall separating them from everything else. They were never actually used as methane tanks, but got converted to water tanks. And then after the first launch, we saw some pretty significant damage on the backside of those tanks because of how tall they are and their proximity to the mount. So SpaceX decided to pivot, and between flights 2 and 3, we saw a lot of work being done to prepare for new horizontal tanks, and new horizontal tanks began to be installed. But aside from the horizontal methane tanks that have been there since they realized they couldn't use the vertical ones, none of the vertical or horizontal tanks that were added between flight 2 and 3 were operational for flight 3. So they have got those online now and appear to have taken all of the vertical tanks offline now. And there's actually only 3 of the original 8 left standing at this point, and we don't believe that those are in use. We've seen a lot of vacuum trucks in recent weeks removing the perlite insulation from between the cryo shell and the actual tank as SpaceX goes through the process of scrapping those. And as a result of that, we've seen a little more ground testing and even a second wet dress rehearsal as SpaceX works out the kinks and all the adjustments that they've made here between flights.
Certainly a lot being shuffled around here. Speaking of shuffling, we're, of course, juggling a number of balls this morning as we're tracking the countdown of this mission. At this point, the SpaceX launch director will be stepping into the poll for the start of prop load, so we'll be keeping an ear open for updates on that. Meanwhile, with the Starliner mission currently heading to the ISS, according to NASA mission managers, have met this morning, and they have pulled go for the Boeing Starliner spacecraft to dock to the International Space Station. Again, that is coming up at 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 16:15 UTC for our friends around the world. NASA said they, quote, review the vehicle's status and continue monitoring the manifold leak rates. So, Stephen, want to bring you in on that point, as you and I have both been tracking the leakiness of the propulsion system on Starliner, but it sounds like they've been able to manage things so far. There was the leak that they knew about coming into the launch attempts, and then a couple of additional leaks in another manifold that popped up overnight, but it seems like they've got a good plan moving forward, and they're in a good configuration to dock with station.
Yeah, Will, I have a few questions, obviously, for NASA officials in their post-docking press conference about the magnitude of this leak, if it has a similar signature to the leak they found pre-launch, and if this is potentially a sign of a systemic issue with the helium system on the Starliner spacecraft. But obviously, NASA and Boeing officials believe they can manage the leaks as they rendezvous with the ISS, and are going to proceed, as you said, with docking around 12:15 Eastern time today. But it'll be interesting to see if they discover more leaks throughout the course of the mission. I know they can handle several more on top of the leaks they already discovered based on some comments that NASA made before the launch. But this certainly, I think, begs the question of whether they need to step back and reassess what is causing these leaks. The hypothesis going into the flight, the leak that they found pre-launch, was that it was a defective seal, a small seal about the size of a button on a shirt. So if that's the case, it proves that a very small piece of hardware can cause these, if not significant, at least notable problems for this test flight. So I think they'll need to take a step back and reassess if these seals have a systemic issue, or if there's something else causing these leaks that we need to evaluate and determine what that is.
Yeah, I think we're certainly all here in the space press looking forward to hopefully a good docking sequence in a few hours, and then certainly the post-docking. I believe there's a post-docking news briefing in which we'll hopefully get a lot more information on exactly what you're just talking about, and they can answer some of the questions that you and I'm sure many others have as well. Marcus, bringing things back to the mission at hand, we're now about an hour and 11 minutes away from the planned liftoff at the current T0 time right now. Of course, SpaceX has a 120-minute window, so if they do need to slide more to the right, they do have that option. And we'll talk more about this as the hour goes on, and certainly as we get into the coast phase, assuming the mission goes well. But the flight objectives for this mission, if you look at the launch timeline between Flight 3 and Flight 4, Flight 4 very much slimmed down from the last launch attempt. Given what was able to be achieved and some of the things where they came up short last time, were you surprised to see that this go around they're really just focused on sort of the bread and butter of Starship operation, at its core?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point. Really, in Flight 3, the main issues that we saw really when it came down to it was the loss of control authority of the Starship, in the Starship part of the flight I'm referring to there. So that really held up the other tests that they wanted to do to a degree. They did the propellant transfer test fine. That was great. They couldn't do their Raptor relight, and that was probably due to the same reason. Things weren't settling properly. And of course, you can't re-enter when you don't have the right orientation. So, Yeah, look, I'm not really surprised as such. I think that it really needed to happen this way, as Elon Musk had said on X here not that long ago. You know, the real big challenge, the biggest challenge that they face right now is the re-entry and whether that heat shield is going to hold up and all that sort of thing, which comes back to our FAA points that we were talking about before, right? So we what we want to see is good control of Starship. They've got two new roll thrusters just under the payload bay door area now on this ship that they didn't have on the last one. They've apparently done a lot of internal changes to the vehicle to try to stop the freezing up of those, or the clogging of those reaction control vents that they're using. Because really, they're just sort of using the ambient sort of tank pressure, as far as I understand. So if there was a blockage there, there's not a huge amount of pressure. These aren't hot gas thrusters or anything like that. There's not a huge amount of pressure to sort of blast anything out. So I think as long as we can see that good control of Starship and good re-entry, at least good control of the orientation during re-entry, that's going to be a really big win. We've all got our fingers crossed, of course. So we want to see that full re-entry. We want to see that plasma right down as far as we can get it. And with any luck, a flip and landing burn, which is one of the key points of difference. In the other previous flights, there was no mention of the Starship trying to do a flip landing, soft landing splashdown in the ocean. And that is supposed to be happening in this flight. So that's a great change. The other big change, of course, is the hot staging ring, which took everybody by surprise. Certainly took me by surprise. This huge hot staging ring is going to be essentially pushed away just by itself after the boost back burn, just 2 seconds after, I believe. And they're doing that essentially because, well, I suspect, speculation, but I suspect they're doing that because the thing is very heavy. A few years back, it might have been, not years back, last year at some point, I believe we saw part of the FAA report that said that the hot staging ring alone is 20,000 pounds, which is roughly 9 metric tons or so. So that's a huge amount of dry mass just to add to the top of the vehicle, which was probably not designed for it at the time. You've got to remember, these vehicles, boosters, and ships have sort of been in development for the best part of 12 months before the hot staging ring was even a thing. So I suspect that maybe the header tanks are maybe just not quite designed big enough to support the extra landing mass and things like that. That's pure speculation, but I'm not surprised to see it being pushed away for this flight. A lot of people have asked, whether this is something that is a permanent thing. It's like, well, if they're going to reject this thing, it's not rapidly reusable, right? But actually, I suspect it's probably just temporary, just until they get the next iteration of boosters through. Then it'll probably just be permanently attached, or just part of the landing process.
Yeah, certainly interesting to see what they decide to do with that moving forward. Of course, SpaceX has outlined plans for future versions of Starship with version 2 and version 3. As we're looking out at Starbase here, of course, this pad shot from not too far away from the rocket is fairly clear. The view from a little bit farther away for most other folks probably looks more something like this, much more hazy and foggy. Stephen, you're down there at Starbase, hoping to get eyes on the rocket. I'm guessing you're peering through some fog and hoping that it clears up in the next hour and some change.
That's right, Will. Yeah, familiar story for you and others who have been to Starbase. It's a hazy morning. These 7 a.m., 7 to 9 a.m. launch windows aren't necessarily the best for viewing, at least from my perspective, because it's often hazy here in the morning, and maybe one day we'll get one of these in a clear blue sky in the afternoon one day. But yeah, it's hazy looking across the tidal flats out toward the east toward the launch pad. You can barely make out the launch tower and the vehicle. Visibility is probably a little bit better than the launch back in March, but also some cloud cover overhead.
Well, hopefully in an hour will be at least just enough to clear things out for the folks that have made the pilgrimage down there. Taking a look at our joined live chats, want to thank some folks for your support this morning as we're stepping on through the count. So appreciate Robert Turpin, the $5 super chat to the LabPadre side. Thanks so much, Robert. Appreciate you being with us this morning, saying thanks, LabPadre and Spaceflight Now for the coverage. So excited. Next up, Erna on the lab stream with an IDR, and sorry, my currency conversion in my head is not quite fast enough for this one, but really appreciate your support today. And JK Video joining us this morning, and simple message, hello everyone. Hello to you, JK. Glad to have you on board this morning. Also want to welcome some new channel members we have here. Blame Techie joining us with membership this morning, as well as Pete 2.0. Welcome aboard. William H joining us with channel membership as well. And Sue Delp, channel membership as well. Really appreciate that from all of you. Of course, channel membership comes with a number of perks on both channels, so be sure to check out the description of that. You can read more about the perks, but of course they include things like additional launch views and a higher quality stream. We do have word from SpaceX now that they are go for prop load, so they took that poll and they are preparing to step through the process of loading propellant on the ship upper stage is where things will begin. Of course, that starts at T-minus 49 minutes again with liquid methane being loaded on the ship upper stage, followed at T-minus 47 minutes with ship LOX load.
It certainly has been exciting seeing how much faster they can do the load these days with the extra pumps and that sort of thing. Sort of somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes as soon as we sort of see it rising in the tanks.
Yeah, I was just as we were getting ready for the stream, you know, looking back at previous timelines for the mission, and you know, it's really starting to feel it's not quite a 1-for-1 with Falcon 9 fueling to this, obviously a much larger vehicle, but at this point, not too far off from the timeline of a Falcon Heavy rocket. So SpaceX really starting to refine its fueling process. As we step on through the count, of course, we've been looking at the test campaign for this mission. Seen a number of different static fires. You're taking a look at the full engine static fire here for the ship upper stage, that same one that you see there on the live view on the right hand side of your screen. Just going to go ahead, step through these fairly quickly, and we'll talk over them as we were watching them. Joel, as we've been seeing the campaign heading towards Flight 4, what has stood out to you about the mission milestones getting ready for Flight 4 as compared to Flight 3?
You know, one of the big things is just how quickly SpaceX has made a lot of their testing seem routine. You know, these static fires and wet dress rehearsals just seem to go off remarkably well when you consider that this is still very much an experimental rocket and has only launched a couple times, and launched a couple times in ways that most other rocket companies don't even, you know, launch, would still just be in the ground testing phase. And, you know, we did see a second wet dress rehearsal this time, but I think that was less to do with the rocket and more to do with, like I said before, that changeover in the ground infrastructure from the vertical tanks to the horizontal tanks, and you know, working out any kinks and clearing out those lines. You know, that's going to change. You know, switching to horizontal tanks is going to change a lot of the head pressures and stuff, because you don't have the same kind of gravity assist that you do with those vertical tanks. But it's amazing how routine this testing has already become. Because it's especially when you really get into it with the booster systems and everything, and how complicated that launch mount is, and all the ground support infrastructure is on this rocket, with the 20 outer engines on the booster getting started by the launch mount itself. So there are 21 quick disconnects on the launch mount for the booster, and then one on the farther up the tower for the ship. It's a very complicated system, and SpaceX, like they do with Falcon 9, they make things look easy.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a increasingly streamlined process from the outside looking in. Love to be a fly on the wall for some of those discussions as they're looking at the changes they're going to make. And of course, one of the changes as we've been watching this looping video on the test campaign heading into Flight 4, they've now done their final static fire test at the suborbital site as they've moved that process over to Massey's, right, Joel?
Yeah, and just a couple of days ago, we actually saw Ship 26, which is, not suspected to be a flight article anymore, just a ground test article, but it was static fired over at the Massey's outpost, the first static fire over there, which is pretty quick considering that they really built that entire test stand over there and flame trench with the water cooled flame bucket pretty quick, in just a couple of months. And I personally, I was actually very surprised, because pretty much as soon as they static fired the Flight 5 vehicle down here at the launch site, as soon as that testing was done, they started tearing apart that test stand. And I hadn't expected them to go that far until they had done this first static fire at Massey's, because it put them in an interesting situation where if something had gone wrong with that first test fire at Massey's and they had to do any kind of engine swap here on this Flight 4 Starship, they would have been in a pickle of not being ready to test the Starship to verify it. But the static fire of Ship 26 over at Massey's looks to have gone well. We haven't seen or heard of any issues with that test, so it looks like Massey's is now online, and we should see ship static fires there. And one of the big things for SpaceX, one of the big bonuses, is that Massey's is set a lot farther back from the highway, so they can do those tests without having to shut down the road, without having to close access to the beach, and without interrupting work at the launch site, which is going to be, a very big deal as they work to build out a second launch tower here. They're going to want that work to be able to continue as uninterrupted as possible for an active launch site.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, speaking of the second launch tower, we're currently watching the progress of additional pieces of the tower segment for that second tower be essentially bundled up and prepared to head out to southern Texas. Here at the press site, where we've got this view right here. Thank you, Stephen, as we're looking at a barge at the turn basin, just to give you a sense of scale and perspective. And actually, it looks like the exhaust is coming off the barge, so it looks like the barge is actually in motion. So as we're speaking with you now, we've got some tower segments headed down to southern Texas. A little bit of perspective on what we're looking at here. There are 2 tower segments on board in the front of the barge. In between the 2 tower segments, you've got essentially the elevator system that slides the chopsticks, the carriage that moves the chopsticks up and down the Mechazilla, and then closest to the dock right now are the chopsticks themselves. And then, of course, in the background, as we're going to tie this to Artemis in just a moment, you can see the mobile launcher out at Launch Complex 39B. They've been doing a series of checkouts and tests at the pad over the last several months. Most visually prominent of those, of course, is the new emergency egress system, which was not needed for the Artemis 1 mission, is going to be very relevant for Artemis 2, given that three NASA astronauts, one Canadian Space Agency astronaut, will be on board the Orion spacecraft. And so with a crew on the mobile launcher, you need a good way for them to quickly get away. If the launch abort escape system has not been activated on Orion, they can use the basket system to safely get away from the tower and into a good position. So good to see the progress on this. It's been a busy couple of days seeing those tower segments and Mechazilla 2 infrastructure being bundled up and tied down to that barge as it is now making its way out.
Yeah, and one very interesting thing about this new chopsticks here is they are significantly shorter than what we're seeing in Starbase currently. So if you look at on the right here at the Flight 4 vehicle, basically all of those chopsticks that extend out past the vehicle when they're lifting is not going to be there. The chopsticks are essentially going to be just long enough to get the vehicles into position over the mount without that extra length at the end. And I think one of the biggest, the leading theories on that is just that it will give them a lot better control authority having those a lot shorter. I think about a month ago, we started seeing them do much quicker testing with the chopsticks at Starbase, kind of preparing for a catch in the near future. And one thing that was very noticeable during those tests is when they moved those chopsticks at speed and stopped, there was a significant wobble as the ends of those want to keep moving, and that inertia because they're so long. So I think it will give them better control authority, but the shorter chopsticks is also an indication that SpaceX believes that they are going to be able to land these boosters very precisely.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to seeing if that theory bears out on the shorter chopsticks, but it sounds like a reasonable conclusion to come to. So we'll track the progress of the second tower coming through. We're now T-minus 51 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Just a couple minutes away from the start of fueling actually beginning. Again, that process begins at T-minus 49 minutes with the loading of liquid methane on the ship upper stage. 2 minutes later, LOX load begins on the ship. That's followed by booster fuel load at T-minus 40 minutes. Booster LOX load, T-minus 37 minutes. Still a bit hazy looking at a farther off camera of ours from a southern view of Starbase. But the outline of Starship is starting to be a little clearer from that vantage point. So hopefully the haze is burning off. Of course, some of the venting from the ground system there creating its own sort of localized fog. But once this rocket launches, naturally it'll literally and figuratively rise above all of that. So won't be too much of an issue. Want to turn to part of our conversation we had last week with Lisa Watson-Morgan. We talked about the Starship rocket, which will be used as the human landing system for the Artemis program, starting with the Artemis 3 mission, is what it's currently aiming for. So in this part of the conversation, we spoke with her about her thoughts on Flight 3 and looking ahead. So again, this is Lisa Watson-Morgan, who heads the Human Landing System program, which is based at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Flight 3 was a great accomplishment, and I mean, clearly it didn't meet every single objective that SpaceX had, but as far as NASA was concerned, it was great to see the learning, the lessons that came out of 1 and 2, and to see how that was employed with either through manufacturing, production, through operations of how Flight 3 was conducted. So that part was really good. We were able to, to see the additional CO2 into the system, and you saw that there weren't any issues around Raptor, and no fires, no anything like that, and a lot of good consistency, frankly, around the engines. And when you get all those engines to light up, for us, it was a significant win, because really that's one of the first steps, obviously, that you need when you're launching.
And we'll have more with our conversation with Lisa Watson-Morgan as the count continues on and as we're in the coast phase as well. Point in time to mark, we're at T-minus 48 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX confirms that prop load on the ship upper stage is underway. So Marcus, to you, bringing you into back in the conversation, your thoughts on that part of our conversation with Lisa and her reflections on Flight 3 as we're now less than 15 minutes away from Flight 4.
To be honest, I haven't listened to that snippet, so I'm not actually sure what she was saying there. But yeah, what was the rundown?
Essentially, talking about the progress that the Starship vehicle has made in the last few flights, and some of the improvements in especially protecting the Raptor engines on the Superheavy booster and the ship upper stage, adding additional hardware to tamp down and prevent fires from breaking out, and some of those corrective actions.
Yeah. Look, it's interesting to see where they're going with it. And we know with version 2, they're going to be quite drastically, I believe, redesigning a lot of the aft section so they don't quite get this same buildup of dangerous gases that can become explosive and things like that. So I think they're putting in a lot of work around the design of that going forward. And obviously they've had to put in a lot of, over the last few iterations of this design, they've had to put in these expulsion systems to sort of, blow out the dangerous gases that build up in there, right? So yeah, there's all sorts of great things that they've done to evolve this. One of the more interesting parts of the second iteration design, version 2, is just that it's being expanded just a little bit. And obviously looking at newer version Raptors and all this sort of thing to simplify this even further. This is going to just make it less problematic in terms of how fragile that whole area under the aft is, because there's a lot of little plumbing parts that come out of all these engines. There's 33 of them packed down in the bottom of this gigantic booster, and it can be damaged quite quickly. So over the past, since Flight 1, they've had to build up all these thermal protection systems and shielding and all sorts of stuff so that the vehicle can continue on its merry way without causing itself all sorts of harm. So we've seen great success with that, obviously, because we've had the last 2 flights that have had 33 engines going all the way up to engine cutoff and stage set. And that's a huge victory alone, I think, because, we've seen other vehicles in the past with a lot of engines have many troubles. I'm not going to talk about the N1, but that was one of the big issues, resonance building up and all this sort of thing. So I just think that being able to see 33 of them working reliably together right up to stage sep like that has been a huge improvement from Flight 1. And each gets better. So we really want to see that today.
Certainly so. And also want to note, as we're now T-minus 45 minutes and counting, a couple minutes ago, second stage LOX load should have also gotten underway. So we'll keep our eyes on the fuel levels. Look for the frost line to begin to form on the ship upper stage as fueling is set to begin on the Superheavy booster in now less than 5 minutes. Well, you can see a little bit of venting in between those two hypersonic grid fins.
Yeah, the venting process is quite interesting. A lot of people may not understand what's going on because we saw a lot of venting here just a little bit earlier. Lots of gas outgassing from the top of the tower and also from the launch mount and things like that. And you see this because as they send the propellant through all these huge lines, you've got to imagine how big these lines are to run this propellant all the way from the tank farm underground right up through the orbital launch mount and up through the tower. There's a lot of plumbing in there, and it's quite warm down in Texas right now. So they've got all of that piping has to be chilled right down, and as they're pumping the propellant through it, it's essentially cooling that, and that's what all the venting is. It's boiling, it's boiled off oxygen, methane, boiled off oxygen, and things like that. So what we're seeing now is it looks quite still, right? There's not that much venting going on, and this is sort of the time when they're essentially starting to top the vehicle, well, fill the vehicle up. So we should see frost lines coming pretty soon here if we don't already.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that quite yet, but it's only been a couple minutes, so should start seeing some evidence from the outside of that fueling process in the next few minutes here.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is that the methane, they start that a couple minutes earlier, but it does take a little longer to show up because the first part of the methane tank that gets filled is actually the downcomer transfer tube from that upper tank down to the engines. And so that tube's in the middle of the liquid oxygen tank. So as that gets cold, there's nothing visibly that we can see on the outside of the rocket until it starts, it's got to fill that downcomer, and then it's got to fill the bottom dome of the methane tank, and then as it starts, the propellant starts to go up the sides of the main tank is when we'll actually start to really see.
Yeah, that's a really good point because you can't see that. Obviously, it's all internal. And we're actually just seeing that propellant load of the Superheavy is underway. SpaceX posted out there. So we should see frost lines creeping up there shortly. Yeah, it's a very good point because that all that propellant's coming into the quick disconnect systems. It's going straight up through the downcomer, right up as you say, and it's only then that we're going to see frost starting to appear on the upper methane tanks. We should see liquid oxygen pretty quickly, though. Looking like we've got visible frost maybe there on the ship.
Yeah, you can just start to see it's starting to frost up there on the bottom of the methane tank, or oxygen tank, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
definitely
a little
starting to
slice of
see,
it.
just starting to form now. I think we're a little bit eager out here in Florida and used to seeing evidence just slightly more quickly on a Falcon 9, but obviously much smaller tanks and a different launch vehicle. So kind of apples to oranges.
Yeah, which really pulling back to what you said earlier in the broadcast about the fact that they've got this Superheavy and Starship loading timeline pretty close to that of a Falcon 9. It's really crazy when you think about just how much more propellants are being added into these vehicles than a Falcon 9. That they can do
It's a crazy amount. It's a crazy amount. It's like that's like 4,600 tons total or something. 3,400 in in the ship, in the booster, sorry, and 1,200 in the ship. So, you're pushing up towards 5,000 tons of propellant that comes in here in about between 30, 40 minutes. It's crazy when you think about how powerful those pumps need to be. The big pumps that sort of sit there beside the hippos. It's really crazy to think how fast it can pump it up there. And you need a lot of pressure to pump it up that high. Obviously, it's not quite the same as when the booster is draining itself out when it's in flight, because at least gravity's pushing it the right way. But yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and
as far as we know, sorry, you go.
Well, I was just going to say that's people might think it's counterintuitive that the ship that has roughly a third the amount of propellant as the booster starts loading before, but it's because of that pressure, because that propellant has to go halfway up the tower before it gets into the ship, whereas the booster loads in from the bottom of the stack.
Yeah.
Just noting where we are on the countdown now. We're T-minus 39 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. As you mentioned, Marcus, SpaceX did note the start of prop load on the Superheavy booster a couple minutes ahead of where they had it in the timeline, although they do note all those times are approximations. The next fueling milestone that has yet to begin is booster LOX load, coming up in just about a minute and a half from now. Want to bring back in another part of our conversation, harkening back to something that we had talked about a little bit earlier in the broadcast. But this is Lisa Watson-Morgan talking about the objective of the on-orbit relight of the Raptor engine while the booster is coasting, something that they were hoping to accomplish last go-around, but because they didn't have good attitude control, they decided to pass over that milestone. So this is a part of our conversation with the head of the HLS program, the Human Landing System, Lisa Watson-Morgan. Let's listen.
SpaceX actually, I think, took on a lot of tasks, activities. I would say in Flight 3, a lot. And you're right, relight of Raptors are really important for NASA. Now, this early in the test campaign, do they have to show it now? No. In the future, yes. And so, as they typically do with their iterative approach, this time they're definitely focusing on the whole hypersonic and water landing, soft water landing. That's one of the key things that they're looking for in Flight 4. And so they have reduced the number of events that they're trying to check off, because you can see each flight test, they're able to do a little more and a little more. And once they're able to get the soft water landing, then it's only a matter of time, really, before they do a return to launch sign and land on the, back on the pad where they launched, which that will be incredibly exciting. And quite an accomplishment. But again, that's just building on what they've been doing in the past on other programs that SpaceX has. And then I think thereafter, we will see the relight of the Raptor. And so, yes, it is a future goal, and it will be something that's required, and we will need to see that.
And so our thanks again to Lisa Watson-Morgan for the insight into that. Followed up asking, by when do they want to see that relight test? And she clarified sometime in the back half of 2024 or early 2025 would be acceptable to NASA. But of course, the sooner they can perform that, the sooner they get the data. Bringing you back into the conversation, Stephen, as you mentioned at the top, for those who were not with us at the very beginning of our live simulcast between Spaceflight Now and LabPadre, you also had the chance to talk with Lisa in the run-up to this mission. From your reporting from that conversation and otherwise, want to just get your thoughts on that piece of the pie of being able to do the relight of the Raptor, as it's going through its coast phase, and the importance of that for the Starship program.
Yeah, well, I was also surprised a little bit to hear from Lisa Watson Morgan when I talked to her a few weeks ago that they're not planning the Raptor relight in space on this mission. The sense I got from her is this is kind of a back to basics mission for SpaceX. They did a lot on Flight 3. They did the tank to tank propellant transfer within Starship, which she said achieved its objectives, transferring some liquid oxygen from one tank to another inside the vehicle in microgravity, no smart feet. That was successful. They also tested the payload bay door, the PEZ door. There were some issues with that. But this mission, no PEZ door opening, no propellant transfer in the ship, no engine relight. They had the roll control issue of the quad thrusters on Flight 3. And the sense I get is the full fix or full solution to that quad thruster issue is still not expected to be fully developed and fully certified for Starship until sometime later this year. And I think we won't see the engine relight until that point. So to me, this indicates that we probably won't see a full orbital Starship for at least one, maybe more flights, depending on how this one goes. And that pushes back the time that we may see actual Starlink satellites on Starship. I expect that's the first payload we'll see on a Starship flight is the larger Starlink satellites flying in that PEZ payload compartment. But I still think that's probably a few flights down the road based on where they are now. They kind of did a grab bag of experiments and demonstrations on Flight 3, kind of figured out where they are at various points on the vehicle, and decided that what they really need to focus on now is getting the ship and the booster back to Earth rather than doing relight or any sort of other orbital operations.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see when exactly SpaceX decides to load up Starship with Starlink satellites and start flying those. I mean, they mentioned possibly doing a booster return to landing site operation by Flight 6. That would be, of course, as Lisa said, an incredible milestone. Marcus, just given the development progress of Starship, does that, for the booster landing back on land, given where things are now, does that seem like a realistic timeline, or is that still a little far out in your mind?
Yeah, look, it's really going to depend on how this flight goes, I think. And actually, the SpaceX streams just started, I believe. But yeah, it really comes down to this one. If they can nail everything that they need to here, the next one, they would probably do some more controlled, tests to ensure that they can get to orbit and obviously deorbit correctly.
Well, this is Stephen here at Starbase. One other thing to note as they go into orbital flights eventually with Starship, when they transition from the suborbital trajectory to a full, stable, low Earth orbit flight, SpaceX is actually going to need an FAA re-entry license on top of the launch license. So that could be something else to watch for.
Yeah, that's a good point, Stephen. As they do need that re-entry license, and be curious to see what the timeline for achieving that will be. If it will, have the benefit of obviously going through all these flight campaigns, and if that will buy them down any time on that approval. And actually, it's ironic you bring that up right now, as we just got an email from the FAA noting that they're welcoming public comment on a draft environmental assessment for inversion space reentry capsule called Ray. So, between inversion space, you've got Varda obviously bringing back capsules, and it's an interesting time for the FAA as they're looking to assess a number of space businesses that are on ramping and looking for that type of operation.
That's right. I think in the long run, SpaceX and the FAA both have an interest. Both the regulator and SpaceX have an interest in getting to a point where they can have a license for multiple missions, both on the launch and reentry side, instead of going through this process for every flight. I'm curious when that might happen. Obviously, for Falcon 9, they kind of have a standing license for launch to launch, as long as there's no mishap. So at some point, Starship will get to that point.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that, I know a lot of people, as every time we get close to one of these Starship launches and we're waiting on a license, a lot of people like to try and hate on the FAA, but the FAA is doing the best they can. This isn't a governmental organization that's, not used to doing business the way SpaceX wants to do business, and they're trying to pivot and they're trying to adapt. But, you think about the other launch providers, the more traditional launch providers, and they didn't launch, anywhere near the way that SpaceX does, both with the cadence of Falcon 9 that the FAA has adapted to, but, also the kind of experimental and fast-paced program that is Starship.
Yeah, it's certainly different paradigm shift for the FAA, just ramping up the pace of progress that they're trying to match with industry, and certainly they've gone up to Capitol Hill asking for additional resources to help make that happen, since the progress of the space ecosystem here in the United States is something that is of great national interest to lawmakers, and so the hope, certainly from the FAA's perspective, is that will garner some greater support from lawmakers in upcoming budgets. And as I mentioned, we are now seeing the start of the SpaceX stream, so they're just going over a recap of Flight 3, as we've already been doing throughout the course of our broadcast this morning.
It's worth noting, I think, that at 30 minutes, at T-minus 30 minutes, 20 seconds with that stream, there was a shot looking upwards of the booster that we hadn't seen before. It's amazing. It's amazing. It was from Flight 3, presumably, just looking straight up as it was coming down through the atmosphere. Very cool.
And yeah, let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, good timing. We're seeing the flight profile of this mission. Appreciate the timing of this animation. It's works well for our conversation here.
Really hoping we get a camera on that hot stage ring ejection.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if they've got a camera pointed, well, I suppose it'll be down of the orientation of the booster, but up towards the hot staging ring as it's sitting right now at the pad. But I think that's something that certainly a lot of us are interested to see exactly what that looks like. And it looks like a ship's going to end up not too far off from where you are down there, Marcus.
Yeah, western side of the country, Western Australia there on that side. We're actually over the opposite side. So in Tasmania, a little tiny island, you can barely see it, just as the curvature there. No, that's a cool animation. Nice load going on there now.
Yeah, it's great to get these aerial shots from some of the drones around the orbital launch mount there. Currently T-minus 25 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. The next fueling milestone that we're anticipating is coming up at T-minus 19 minutes and 40 seconds. It's when the Raptor engine chill down on both the booster and the ship gets underway. Just as a quick point of note for our viewers here on the LabPadre and the Spaceflight Now side, you'll notice that our countdown clock's slightly different from what you're seeing here on the SpaceX feed. Our clock is coming in real time. What you're seeing from SpaceX coming in on a slight delay. So again, we'll call things out in real time. And actually, let's go ahead and listen to SpaceX's Dan
Base for yet another Starship launch. I'm coming to you live from the Raptor's nest behind the Mega Bay. I'm here with our Pad Red team and some of our flight controllers this morning. Everything has been going really smooth. We did have the Red team going a little bit earlier to fix a ground side issue, but that was taken care of. That's why we slid a little bit later into our window. But as of right now, we are on track for liftoff at 7:50 a.m. Central Time. That's 12:50 UTC. As you can see, we are actively loading propellant onto Starship and Superheavy. Those frost lines are ticking up as we load liquid methane, that's our fuel, liquid oxygen, that's our oxidizer, onto both vehicles. They're cryogenic, so they're subcooled to several hundred degrees below zero. Since Flight 3, we've made a few more upgrades, helping to bring Prop Farm 2.0 online. That's just going to help us to continue to shorten the amount of prop load time that we're going to need. We're also going to be using it for Launch Tower number 2, which is going to be coming to Starbase real soon. The faster we go, the less prop we're going to lose to boil off, and the better we can ensure things like temperatures are in the right range for Raptor startup. Now, those first 2 flights took about 90 minutes to load prop on board. That third, we knocked it all the way down to just 51 minutes. We're aiming for about 46 minutes of prop load time for today's op, eventually hoping to get that down all the way to 40, which for some context, that's just 5 minutes more than we take to load Falcon 9, but we're doing it with 10 times the amount. So this morning, ship prop load started at T-minus 50 minutes, booster at T-minus 43 minutes. We're going to pause the ship main tank prop load in just a couple of minutes to do the header tanks, which are going to do that attempted ship landing burn. We expect the ship to close out all of its prop at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds before liftoff, and then booster at about 2:50. Now, our final countdown sequence is going to look very familiar. It's going to be the exact same as it was on flights 2 and 3. So we'll light those engines, and then about 4 seconds later, we will actually see it lift off. But I mean, right now, we are just under 23 minutes away from launch. We're not working any issues either with the vehicle, the range. Weather is 95% go, so not dealing with any winds or weather issues today. If we do have to scrub, our next attempt would probably be about 48 hours from now. It's all going to be driven by commodities and just how far we get into the count. But everything looking good for liftoff just about 22 and a half minutes from now. I'll check back in with you guys in a few minutes, and I'll send it back over to Kate and Jesse.
And some good updates from SpaceX's Dan Hote. Stephen, bringing you back in here, you heard Dan echoing one of the points that we were making earlier in the broadcast, that they're getting the fueling of Starship pretty close to approximating what we're seeing on a Falcon 9 rocket. Just your thoughts on that, fairly dramatic shift on, a vehicle that has significantly more fuel on it.
Yeah, it's an impressive feat. Starship has roughly 10 times, and by mass, 10 times the propellant on the Falcon 9 rocket, and it's taking not much longer than a Falcon 9 for the load. The Starship Falcon 9 begins loading at 35 minutes, just for comparison's sake. So it is something that SpaceX wants to tighten the timeline for tanking Starship in order to eventually achieve the types of turnarounds that Elon Musk envisions for Starship that's going to be necessary. And also just kind of reduces the workload on the launch team. They don't have to come in with their ship for a 10 or 12 hour countdown, as we sometimes see with other rockets. They and come in and start overseeing this countdown, which is actually automated, but there is a team kind of looking over the shoulders of the computer that's controlling the countdown here at the control center at Starbase. It lessens the time they need actually to be on console.
Great shot of the engine bay there.
Yeah, I think Dan actually broke some information, some news there that almost slipped by me because he said it very nonchalantly, but unless I misheard, he said, when he was talking about how they have Prop Farm 2.0, it sounded to me like he said it was going to be used for Tower 2 as well, which means we're not going to see a second tank farm built here in the coming months like a lot of people were expecting, but that they're going to use one farm to feed out to both towers, which is news to me.
Yeah, I've always been interested in whether they really would immediately. That doesn't mean that they may not put another second one in later once they've got it really, dialed in, this whole return landing system. But if they're launching infrequently, they don't really need to have two tank farms right now. They could just route it. Great views there. That drone shot's
the interesting
great.
thing, though, is that by the time they get to launching for the Artemis program, they are going to need a pretty rapid cadence and for a short period of time. But I think that they, like he said, their turnaround if they don't launch today is 2 days. So that would be my expectation going forward. It takes hundreds of tanker truck deliveries to load up this fuel farm for a launch. So if they're trying to fill a depot in space, they're not going to be launching from at a very rapid cadence from here at a one tank farm.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Another little interesting tidbit of information was that they confirmed there earlier that the hot staging ring jettison was a temporary thing. So that just confirmed it for those people that were asking. I've heard that many, many times in the last couple of weeks.
Going back to the launch cadence for the Artemis campaign, the way I look at it is basically SpaceX needs to get the Starship flying about as often as the Falcon 9 is currently flying, at least for that short period of time, to fully do the tankers refills of the depot in the north.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Just want to make a quick point in time note. We're currently T-minus 17 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. They have begun, as you saw, some views of the 33 Raptor engines at the base of the Superheavy booster. The Raptor engine chill is in work. And at this point, they're going to continue filling both the ship upper stage and the Superheavy booster until just about the 3-minute mark on either side of that. Ship prop load wraps up at T-minus 320. Booster prop load wraps up at T-minus 250.
Little interesting part of the animation that we just saw there a moment ago, it looks like the engine ignition fires up before it starts flipping, which is a bit different to what we saw in the early landing attempts. I believe that we saw it flip and then fire the engines. So that's interesting. That's interesting.
I thought it did light right as they were flipping.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I believe that they need it because I believe that the engines help control that tail end of the flip. So they need to be up and running.
Yeah, maybe it looked like it sort of fired up a little bit earlier in that animation, but it might be wrong.
It is sometimes crazy to think about just how long ago how long it's been since we've seen the flip maneuver from a ship.
Oh, sure.
We are, 3 years now since SN15?
Yeah, I forget how long it was, but yeah,
I think it was
ages.
May of 2021, so we're just over 3 years now.
A little over 3 years and perhaps under 2 hours from seeing it again. As we're looking at the ship upper stage, and actually this is a good time to bring this question for you, Joel. You see there what appear to the layperson as a couple of missing tiles on the heat shield. We know that there's another one that's slightly less in depth, but can you explain why it looks like there's some missing heat shield tiles and what SpaceX is actually doing with this?
Yeah, and we got confirmation a little bit last night from Elon's alternate Twitter account, that, because people were asking, why are there missing heat shield tiles, and he said experiments. One of the big thing really for this flight test, it's all about that reentry data. They need to see where they're at with this heat shield. This is one of the biggest unknowns still of this vehicle. One of the things they really have very little data about through all their testing. And
it's interesting, actually, because
it.
SpaceX just posted about this exact thing, like literally a minute ago. So their exact text is, we intentionally placed one thin heat shield tile and removed 2 tiles completely from the ship to measure how hot things get without tiles in those locations, while also testing some thermal protection options. So that's a more official, straight from SpaceX just a minute ago.
Yeah. And, we saw a tweet from Elon, I think earlier in the week, about the basically the fragility of this system, and that, there's definitely spots where a loss of a single tile they think could probably compromise the entire vehicle during reentry. And we have definitely seen heat shield tiles falling off on every launch so far. And it's very important to note that where these 2 missing tiles and 1 thinner tile is it's on the skirt. And there's some holes where those 2 missing tiles are that are presumably sensors, where they can get good heating data on what's going on. Presumably there's some behind good tiles. There's some behind each of these experimental locations. They can get good data on the changes, the differences in the heating. And the reason that you would put them on the skirt is that if the plasma does burn through in that location, it's not puncturing one of the propellant tanks. So it's much likely to cause an immediate failure in the vehicle if you lose a tile in the skirt, which is an unpressurized section to begin with.
It's also, I think, just behind a vacuum Raptor. But then it was like, well, the vacuum Raptors aren't actually needed for landing anyway, after they cut off to get into their trajectory initially. So even if it sort of melts through one of those vacuum Raptors, doesn't really matter for the landing burn. So yeah, it's a safe place to have them. And it's going to be interesting to see how they go with this thinner heat shield tile. It was also worth mentioning that they showed an interior shot of a HLS design there at about 14 minutes, T-minus 14 minutes 43. That was a cool shot.
And as we're getting down to the final 12 minutes, Stephen, one last quick one from me to you before we really get into the final 10 minutes. We're looking at some video from an integrated test between Axiom Space, NASA, and SpaceX down at Hawthorne as they were running through some of the tests with a mock-up of the elevator and Actually, let's pause and listen into Dan Hout real quick.
The board looks really clean, not tracking any impediments to a launch just under 12 minutes from now. Prop loads continuing. Looking at the numbers real quick, we're about 85% full on the ship. We did pause to start filling those header tanks on ship. Again, those are the 2 smaller tanks in the very top of the nose cone that we're going to use for that attempted landing burn with ship. And with the booster, we're just at about 75, 76% or so on our methane and LOX, so getting pretty full there. Those are going to continue down to about 3 minutes and 20 seconds before liftoff. That's when we'll close out all the prop in the ship, and then T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds on the booster. A lot of work also going on in the background. Our range safety teams working to make sure the area, not just around the pad, but in the sea space out in the Gulf, and also in the anticipated entry point in the Indian Ocean, are clear. We're not tracking any blockers, any boats, anything like that in the zone right now, but their work literally continues right up until those last couple of minutes. So they're working pretty hard to make sure everything stays clear. But right now the range is green. I already talked about it in the beginning. It looks a little bit cloudy, but weather not a concern today. Really light winds. We only had about a 5% chance of violation when we started this morning, and that's held. So everything continuing to look really good for launch so far. The pad itself is getting ready. Reminder that we're going to light those engines about 4 minutes before it actually takes off. So you'll see them start. The 33 engines on Superheavy start to light prior to that T0, and then about 2 seconds after, we'll start to see first motion. But everything looking great. Just coming up on 10 minutes until launch. Getting excited down here, ready to feel the rumble. I'll send it back to you guys over in Hawthorne.
So good updates from Dan, and it's good to hear that the clouds that are obscuring some visibility are not going to be an impediment to launch. But Stephen, quickly to you before we get into the final 10 minutes, or now the final 9.5 minutes. Just your thoughts briefly on that integrated test between Axiom and SpaceX, the progress for HLS. We may have lost touch with Stephen at this point. We'll talk with him on the other side of launch.
It sure is getting exciting at this point. Like, I mean, everybody in the like, it always amazes me. There's so many people in the chat, right? So almost 30,000 people here on the Spaceflight Now side, and what, another 4,500 here on the lab side. Like, everybody liking these really helps to push them out there. So yeah, thanks for liking them to get that up there. So many people everywhere. Like, just sound out to where you're watching from. I'm always interested in how many people are watching from all these locations around the world.
Yeah, definitely love to see where folks are joining in from. And as you're watching with us live, as we're coming into the final 8 minutes and some change, whether you're watching on the Spaceflight Now side or the LabPadre side, be sure to hit that like button and share the stream. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this coverage to more people. Taking a quick look as we're in the final few minutes here, want to acknowledge some folks for your support today. Our thanks to Tom Hadelbreck for 100 Norwegian krona super chat. Really appreciate that. Yasta with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Yasta, saying thanks to Lab and Spaceflight Now for bringing us the world's most inspiring events. We're more than happy to do so. Appreciate your support of the work. Piper Saul with a $20 super chat, saying simply go SpaceX. Thank you, Piper Saul. Jonathan McD joining us as well with a $2 or £2 sterling super chat, saying remember to hit that like. It means more boost. Absolutely. Cosmic with a $5 super chat, saying give me fuel, give me fire. And cheers, everybody. Landon Gahau with a $10 super chat, saying showing love for all of you. And a special shout out to Marcus House. Thank you all for your dedication to space exploration news.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for watching.
Dan Kerman with a $10 super chat. And hashtag free Stumpium. Sure that the hopper there's got great views and enjoys watching these Starship launches for as much as he can. Motor Gas with a $5 super chat. Also with a little bit of support for Stumpy there. Crow Guy with a €5 super chat, offering some root beer money for the lab folks. Let's listen into Dan real quick for a quick update.
6.5 minutes away. You can see when we throw up the graphics for prop load that we're almost closed out. Ship more than 90% full. Those header tanks are done. And then the boosters right coming up on 90% real soon. So we're going to see those close out in the next couple of minutes. Ship's going to end at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It'll be fully loaded. And then booster at about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. After all the props loaded on, we go through a lot of steps to safe ground systems. You're doing things called pushbacks, where you're just clearing all of those lines on the ground of propellant before we lift off. But once we're done, we're going to have 10 million pounds of liquid propellant on board Starship to help power the most powerful vehicle ever designed. If we do hold, we have a built-in hold gate at T-minus 40 seconds. We can hold there for about 30 minutes or so today. If we need to wait for final pressure checks or for if we have anything on the range, anything like that. Did just get that the range is green. So we are coming up 5 minutes and 20 seconds away. We are not planning to hold at T-minus 40 unless we trip some kind of hold alarm, something like that. So we could blow right through that gate and go right to launch. Don't be shocked if we hold at T40, though. And if we do, we can hold for a couple of minutes and then keep going. Our window is open all the way until 9 a.m. today.
Now, once we pass through T-minus 40 seconds, a number of events will occur in rapid succession. The ground spin and ignition.
And some good updates. Of course, we'll keep a close eye out to see if, in fact, they do need to enter into that hold at T-minus 40 seconds. And again, just as a reminder, if for whatever reason they are not able to launch today, if they hit a last-minute issue, they do have a 48-hour turnaround time for this mission. So I'll be back looking for a liftoff if they need it on Saturday, June 8th. But so far, all seems to be progressing well towards a liftoff in now less than 4 minutes, Joel.
Yeah, it's getting real exciting. And you know, like kind of harkening back to what we said earlier, is they make this look easy. This is still an experimental rocket, and here we are under 4 minutes to the fourth launch of it, and following significant changes to their ground support infrastructure, and they're currently tracking no issues and on track for an on-time liftoff here. And, you know, we are just about to hit booster load, or ship load first. Ship load and booster load here coming up real soon. So
really hoping we get to see those great onboard camera views again. I know it was a huge surprise when I was on Flight 3. Like, we want to see all those views and more for this one.
Yeah, certainly a benefit having the capabilities of Starlink on board the last time around, and you know, it's almost like an advertisement of sorts for that SpaceX capability as they continue to launch Starlink missions at a breakneck pace from both Vandenberg and here in Florida, and soon with Starship, but certainly proving out the robustness and viability with this mission, and looking to another demonstration as well coming up on the Polaris Dawn mission, as Jared Isaacman and his 3 other colleagues are going to be doing a Starlink demo from on orbit as well.
I wonder how hyped everybody is out there in the chat. From 0 to 10, how hyped are you? I'm starting to feel the nerves right at the minute.
Absolutely. We did hear that call out that prop load is complete, coupled with a post on X from SpaceX confirming that Starship is now loaded with more than 4,500 metric tons or 10 million pounds of propellant. And with that, we are now less than 2 minutes away from the liftoff of the Starship rocket on Flight 4.
Ooh. Get a little bit speechless at this point. Elon's sitting there with little X.
Yeah, it looks like Elon and one of his kids is there in Starship mission control. Now less than a minute to lift off.
Go, baby, go.
It seems like we've passed through the 40 T-minus 40-second hold possibility.
Past that now.
Yeah, it
Yeah, and
seems
in the
like they're gonna
SpaceX
go.
feed, they're also past the 40-second hold. So in real time, we may just be about 10 seconds away from liftoff. Let's go ahead and with this terminal
that's a cool
count
shot.
in approximately 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And we have liftoff. Liftoff of
Yes.
SpaceX's Starship rocket
Yes.
on
There she
Flight 4.
goes.
33 Raptor engines igniting. And the Superheavy booster propelling this nearly 400-foot tall rocket into the skies above southern Texas.
There does appear to be a Raptor out based on SpaceX's graphic, which should be still within flight parameters.
Should be able to confirm that in a minute.
Yeah, it looks like just one is out. Given the amount of cloud, it looks like there's basically no cloud or ground views.
Yet we can confirm that there is a single
Definitely
Raptor
out.
engine out.
Oh, there's one. Okay. Yeah, you can see that one engine bell that is unlit.
Let's hope that's the only one.
It also appeared to happen right at liftoff. Vehicle's now passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure.
Yeah, and just worth noting that, you know, Superheavy is able to do this with that engine out. It should not be any super cause for concern, and the fact that it is one of the outer ones means that it's, you know, not a concern for boostback or landing burn either.
Right, because those are the interior
Nice to see that dual
13
camera
engines,
there.
I believe.
Oh, look at that.
Now coming up on the second minute into flight. So far, with the exception of that engine that's out, things seem to be progressing well with this mission. We're coming up on a few different events in fairly rapid succession. We'll hit MECO, or most engines cut off in this one, about T+2 minutes and 41 seconds. It'll be followed by hot staging 4 seconds later. The boost back burn will start up, the flip maneuver at T+2 minutes 49 seconds. The boost back burn should cease its firing at T+3 minutes 52 seconds. The hot stage ring will be jettisoned 2 seconds after that. Then the Super Heavy booster will become transonic at about the 6.5 minute mark. So we're coming up on
It's worth
MECO
noting that those outer
momentarily.
Raptor engines don't need to restart again anyway, so as long as it gets to stage set, we're all good. Go, go, go. Yes.
And a good hot staging here.
That looked beautiful.
The boost back burn
All
is
engines
in
are
motion.
good.
And a good
All
ignition
the-
of
all
the ship upper stage engines, all 6 firing nominally by all accounts.
And a good relight for the boost back on the booster of the outer ring of inner engines.
And as a reminder, during Flight 3, there were 6 of those engines that were needed for the boost back burn that shut down prematurely. So keep a close eye on these 13 Raptor engines on the booster. We're continuing to see good views from the ship upper stage as well.
That looked really good. That looks beautiful.
And that's a conclusion
Do
of
we
the
get to see the hot
boostback burn
staging ring?
shutting
Maybe
down
not.
right on time.
Yes,
Oh, there it goes.
we do.
There it goes. Yes.
And the hot stage
I was
ring.
hoping
Look
we
at
would get
those
that.
views.
I was hoping we would get that.
That's an unbelievable shot.
Now let's just hope that it doesn't come back and hit the thing. Important point, that one.
Yeah, and Marcus, to your point, the SpaceX commentator noting that future iterations of Starship will use a lighter hot staging ring, so they won't need to do this separation maneuver. But in this current iteration, that maneuver seemed to have worked, and they're continuing to press on. Now coming up on about 5 minutes into flight. Next up, the Superheavy booster will reach a transonic state, traveling below the speed of sound. Then the landing burn for the Superheavy booster will begin at T plus 6 minutes and 43 seconds. The landing burn concluding at just past the 7-minute mark.
Is looking very smooth.
Yeah, good coast phase right now, the booster.
Just take note of the speed as it hits the lower parts of the atmosphere. It just screams in much, much faster than a Falcon 9.
Yeah, just a little bit faster. Now coming up on minute 6 into flight so far. As the Super Heavy booster continues to come back down for a water landing out in the Gulf of Mexico. The landing burn again set to begin now less than 30 seconds from now, about T plus 6 minutes and 43 seconds.
Oh, an amazing shot here of the top of the
Oh,
booster.
look at that. Look at that. We've never seen that before.
And
I think
yeah,
all
minus the hot staging ring.
Starship animators are loving this shot and will be using it for
Look
their
at that
animations.
one too. Looking upwards from the booster. You can actually see some of the actuators going there too on the grid fins when we were up in that
landing
review.
burn start.
Good to see a good variety of camera views on the booster as well.
All right, we want to see a clean burn here. Come on, come on.
I believe the engines should have already lit from the timeline.
Yeah, we're
Oof.
past the point of nominal landing burn beginning.
Uh-oh.
Those grid fins
I
are
would
wobbling
say we're...
something. Yeah. Oh, they lit all but one. Oh, look at
Oh
this.
my gosh.
It is slowing down significantly.
It's
Oh,
slowing
there's stuff
down.
flying off it.
There's the landing burn.
Oh, look at this.
Looks like 12
Wow,
out of
wow,
13
wow.
engines have relit.
Wow, it
Now
did
down
it.
to 3.
It did
Oh
it.
my gosh. It's hovering.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hovering.
Wow, wow, wow.
Amazing.
Just pausing above the Gulf of Mexico. And SpaceX confirms splashdown of the Super Heavy booster.
Wow.
So you can see it just now descending into the Gulf of Mexico.
That was unbelievable.
I did not think that was going to happen. They went right past their, the timeline said that the landing burn was supposed to start at 6:43. I think it was closer to 7 minutes.
It seems
Yeah,
like the
geez,
folks
the
in
landing
Hawthorne
burn
also
started so late.
equally thrilled at reaching that milestone.
Should have ship cut off now. There we go.
Yeah, we're about 20 seconds away from ship engine cutoff.
Yes, and the last lot there shortly. Wow. It's about the only word I've got. Wow. And it's the engine cut off for the second set about nowish. There we go. That looked beautiful. With the exception of that one engine missing on the outer ring of the booster, absolutely perfect.
Yeah, and I believe they were one engine short on that landing burn too, weren't they?
There were 13, 12 of the 13 were lit by my count.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite catch that. Right. So there was one missing for a little bit there.
But even so, it seemed to be able to hover pretty well. And most importantly, those 3 center engines were able to continue to stay lit, which, is certainly proving out the path forward on the viability for a booster landing back at the Mechazilla. Coming up
I
on...
can't believe they did it.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Marcus. One thing to note so far, which seems to be going well, is you seem to have much better attitude control on the ship upper stage. It's still early days with this, but it looks like the ship is maintaining its orientation pretty evenly.
Yeah, I believe by this point in last test, it was already rolling.
Yeah, it does have a rotation going on, not a roll, a rotation, but that's probably planned.
It looks like this is a replay of the ship coming back in for a landing on the Gulf of Mexico. So actually, listening into the SpaceX commentator, this may be ground tracking from here in Florida, from the southern tip of the peninsula, with eyes on the ship upper stage. So for those who are down in the Keys or in the Miami area, look up and wave. You've got a Starship heading over your... And so at this point, we're going to be in a coast phase until T plus 47 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Marcus, I know the word you would put it down to is wow, but if you're able to expand upon, what we've seen so far with the mission, just your thoughts so far with this initial stage of flight.
Well, I'm ecstatic about it because, it again shows that they can lose engines and still obtain all these objectives that they need to do. So, it's a good example of how robust the design is, in that all these engines are isolated from each other. They're not going to affect each other. That one that was out on the outer Raptor was a Raptor boost engine on the outside. They don't gimbal anyway, so they can lose a few of those and it's fine. In fact, they can lose a few probably from the inside and it would still be okay. But the fact that we saw one out and it still ascended perfectly, everything had good control. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we've got... I'm sort of intrigued about when they're going to try to do some attitude control on the ship, maybe to sort of rotate it sideways as it was going to enter in. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's a good question. As they were also just teasing on the screen and in the commentary, they're very much advertising and putting out there that the views that we've had and will be getting back in a little bit are brought to us by Starlink. SpaceX certainly eager to capitalize on the marketability of the moment with so many eyeballs on this mission.
Yeah. Oh, look, this has been an incredible success, in my opinion, already. Even with some obvious little issues there with one or two of the engines, if one of the inner ones didn't light on the landing there. This is it's been a huge thing. Like, to see that booster almost, basically hovering there. That's a great thing that this booster can do that, say, Falcon 9 can't. Falcon 9's thrust to weight just on one engine when the booster's almost empty, when the Falcon 9 booster's almost empty, is too high. So they've got to do this sort of hover slam thing when they hit the drone ship. They can't start the burn too early, otherwise it just takes off again, right? So being able to hover like that is a really cool thing to see, and they need to do that perfectly for a tower catch. I imagine the first time that we see the tower catch, it's going to come in and it's probably going to hover there for maybe 5 seconds so that the arms can just slowly grab it and but not be too sort of brutal about it. And that hover is a great sign. And who knows? We could actually see, after seeing that, we could actually see a catch attempt on that tower. If SpaceX are happy with that control and it hit the mark exactly where they wanted, because we don't know that yet, then that's going to be a great sign of what's to come in Flight 5. And the next big thing that we want to see, obviously, is good attitude control from the Starship. We want to be able to see that they've got good control of that as it starts to re-enter the atmosphere. We don't want to see that rolling, tumbling like we saw last time. It's a little early to say. I suspect there's a slight rotation to it at the moment just to keep propellant settled. But yeah, we'll see. We've got to see. Extremely exciting. Good choice of music too.
Yeah, a little bit of classical music coming in from SpaceX on their broadcast. And speaking of people coming into the broadcast, want to bring in our streaming partner on this operation, Lab. If you can hear us, you're down there at the Rocket Ranch, not too far away from Stephen Clark. Just wanted to get your initial impressions of the launch as well, having been able to see it from your vantage point. And we're going to troubleshoot some audio from Lab's mic here. But Stephen, if you're with us, you're also down there in Starbase. No is a little bit visually obstructive, but we're able to get at least a halfway decent view of liftoff. What was it like there on the ground?
I think everybody's in shock at this point. I can imagine how loud it was down there at the launch. It would have been deafening.
Yeah, it sounds like we're having some difficulty getting Stephen and Lewis down there at Starbase. We're working to troubleshoot.
Will, you got a copy on me now?
All right, it sounds like we've got Lewis back now. Lab, if you can hear me, go ahead.
Hey, Will. Yeah, I tell you, we really got rocked over here as usual. This whole place shook. Our equipment was shaking on our table here, and although we didn't have a great view, it was really cool to hear it and feel it, and just all the excitement in the air over here at Rocket Ranch. We have a wonderful community, all kinds of people from all over the world that are here, and it was really great experience.
And that's terrific to hear. I'm sure just the sights and sound, and certainly being surrounded by a lot of space fans, especially those that have traveled a great distance to be down there to witness for themselves. I mean, I remember for Flight 2 when I was down there with you guys, it was quite the event.
Yeah, I was really hoping you were going to be down here for this one, but it looks like Starliner kind of kept you in Florida, which I can imagine that you needed to be there for that one.
Interestingly, it looked like we had the simulation of the tower arm sort of coming in to pretend to do the catch.
Yeah, I missed that. I'll have to go back and look for that on the replay. But certainly as they were talking about doing the soft water landing with the Superheavy booster, it was in essence to simulate what it would be like if it were being caught by the Mechazilla arm. So that's a nice sort of tongue-in-cheek visual cue from SpaceX that they did that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If they want to, if they're really serious about catching here on the next sometime in the next couple flights, they need to make sure that both those systems are working in sync. I would expect that that's going to be something that we see, any other launch between now and that first catch, is those chopsticks are going to be moving at the same time that booster's hovering out in the Gulf.
I do have a question for either of you all, Joel or Marcus. The some people have been asking around here as well, and for the layperson, how are they going to actually catch it? Some people think that they're going to be caught by uh, the those little wings that are out, but how exactly are they going to grab a hold of that thing?
So the
Are you
catching
referring to the
should
Starship there?
be
Or the booster?
Yeah, Lab, are you referring to the booster?
Yes, the booster.
Yeah, I think it's going to be caught the same way that it's lifted. It's going to be those two small little hard points. SpaceX has said in the past that the grid fins could serve as a, kind of backup, but they're not really, that's not what they're designed for. They would potentially stop it from falling onto the launch mount or something, but the plan is that those two little hard points are going to land right on those rails, and that means that SpaceX has to have pinpoint accuracy in all dimensions with that rocket. It can't just be between the arms. The rotation has to be, probably within a degree or two, for those points to get on those chopsticks. They do have maybe a little bit of room, especially with these longer chopsticks, in regards to distance from the tower. And the arms can, swing together a little bit to make small adjustments to its left to right movement. But if it's off in either of those directions, then the rotation is going to change as well. So they have to be pinpoint accurate, but those two little hard points should drop down. They've installed some cushions on the inside of the chopstick arms, so that when they come in, they're not likely to dent the tank, the methane tank on the booster, but those hard points should drop right onto the rails that they use to lift. And then there's little pusher cars on there that would allow them to push the hard points to the exact lifting position so that they can just rotate over and set it right back in the launch mount.
Just quickly to interrupt there, Elon has actually posted to say that they do have acquisition signal. The ship is okay. They've got 11 internal cameras transmitting, but for some reason their external cams are out. So they're trying to figure out why, but the ship is still alive and happy, apparently. Sorry to interrupt.
It's good information. I was kind of curious because during Flight 3 we had pretty much good visuals all the way through the coast phase, and
yeah, I mean, we definitely want those views
today
for re-entry. Yeah.
But yeah, but to get back to catching, the ability to catch it on those same lifting points and then rotate over and put it right back in the launch mount is it's key both to rapid reusability, being able to have that booster just, once if the chopsticks set it right back in the mount, the booster quick disconnect can pop back open and reconnect, which allows them to one, safe the vehicle to get the pad back to open that much sooner. They don't have to wait for those residuals to boil off, which can take some time. So it allows them to detank anything left in any of the residuals left in the vehicle. But in terms of rapid reusability, the booster would then be ready to be, have another ship stacked on top of it, refuel it, and go.
Yeah. I think another cool little point about the booster catch, or the design of the booster itself, is some of those sort of external beefed up, I don't know what you call them, actually stringers or supports. They're sort of angled just at that area where the arms would sort of grab in. So I wouldn't mind betting that it'll sort of come in and hover, and I reckon they'll almost slam the arms shut, like not be delicate at all, just slam them in, and so that it screeches up the side, slides up the side, so that there's really no choice but for it to slip in. I'll bet that they're not delicate at all. I reckon the arms will just slam right in. It doesn't matter if they damage the booster to a degree, not that they would. I think that's probably stronger than the arms would be. But yeah, I wouldn't mind at all betting that they'll really grab it hard. I don't think they'll be delicate.
And I don't think the chance of them damaging it's very high. Some people may not know, but there is actually an arm that sticks out at the right out from the fulcrum of the arms on each one that is kind of a hard stop that's about the width of a booster. So they can't really crush it too bad. The damage could possibly come from just that kind of flex that I was talking about earlier with these longer chopsticks. As they stop rapidly, those ends tend to swing a little bit, which would compress a little more than they would maybe want it to.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently also external cameras come online in 11 minutes, so Musk says. Should get to see re-entry, hopefully.
Yeah, I was
That's
going to
exciting.
say the it's just unfathomable the amount of accuracy that they're going to need to hit those hard points. A vehicle so big hovering there just to hit those two tiny points is just insane.
Oh, if they can do that,
Just-
I'll be absolutely astounded. I would bet that they'd probably be more likely to shear the arms off, but let's hope for let's be optimistic, as they say. It's I think you're absolutely right, Lewis.
Just for a quick point in time to interject, gentlemen, as you noted, Marcus, that Elon tweeted external cameras coming on in 11 minutes. So we're T plus 25 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. So that should come on at about now, given the time of the tweet, about 35 minutes into flight. And that is just about 12 minutes ahead of where on the timeline the Starship entry should come up. So it sounds like they'll get things back online with a good amount of margin before we really get into the meat and potatoes of things here.
Gosh, it really has been amazing. You might have noticed, like as the booster was like plummeting through the lower parts of the atmosphere, there was stuff shearing off everywhere. There's probably like heat shielding, I reckon, from in the aft area. A lot of this stuff is going to be removed anyway for version 2 Starships, so it's probably not too critical. But yeah, there was stuff sort of popping off there. I'm sure that they'll be looking at those camera views to figure out where more reinforcement is needed. The pressures that you're talking about there are kind of crazy too. Like it'll be like being hit with a sledgehammer when they're coming in that fast.
Yeah, and especially because the bottom of the booster is not aerodynamic. You know, it is the booster itself without the Starship on top of it is not a super. The ends of it are not aerodynamic things that because they don't want it to be. You know, they want it slowing down as much as it can on its own, but the result of that is increased pressures and forces acting on the vehicle as it comes in.
I was surprised actually by just how quickly it slowed down. Like it was like if you looked at it past 10 kilometers in altitude, like it was dropping kilometers like multiple times a second. And just in those last couple, the atmosphere just must get so thick in those last couple. It really is like almost hitting a brick wall. Obviously the landing burn started up as well. It seemed to almost start up a little bit late, but they still made it. But yeah, it's just amazing how much it will slow just in those last few kilometers.
Yeah, I was watching it back. I was very surprised by, with the landing burn and the 12 engines lit up, the outer ring of that, which had 9 that lit of the 10, they were not lit for very long, but they slowed that vehicle down very rapidly that last little bit.
Yeah.
I really, I was expecting a hard crash into the water at that point. I was very surprised, and it went remarkably well, I thought.
Yeah, like I was looking at the altitude and I'm like, oh, we've lost it. There's no way. And all of a sudden it's sitting there hovering. It's like, what? It was really quite incredible. I've got to go watch the replay of that. Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting. Will they try to do will they try to do a catch for Flight 5, or will they maybe try one more, maybe do a catch with Flight 6?
If I were a betting man, I would bet Elon is saying, let's do it next one. But I would guess cooler heads are going to prevail and we're going to see one more, especially with the single engine being out. I think they're going to want to see. I think they're going
See
to
if they
want
can just
two
perfect it.
examples to feel a little better.
Mm.
But a lot of people are of the opinion that a failed catch is just the worst thing that could happen. It's important to keep in mind that by the time that the catch is supposed to happen, there is not a lot of propellant left in that vehicle. It's not the same kind of, it would not result in the same kind of explosion as if, you had a fallback to the pad or something. The very bad things that were talked about in the early days of this program.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
And a lot of that infrastructure has been hardened. And I don't know that the damage would be any worse than what we saw from Flight 1. I mean, it wouldn't be good, but I don't think it would be like a tear down and rebuild the whole stage 0 either.
As long as it gets dropped on target, then it should be okay because the arms are sort of rotated. It's not going to drop it right on the orbital launch mount or something like that, although it could still fall over onto it. But I would think as long as it comes down on target and they sort of, if the arms shear off or they just grab it or whatever, as long as it falls straight down and that sort of thing, probably do more damage to some of the tower than anything. But the tower's pretty beefy. Like it's a monster-filled concrete structure. It's probably not going to get torn up too much by essentially a shell. I mean, when the booster's empty, it's essentially like a Coke can type thing. It's not. It's got nowhere near the mass that it does when it's launching.
Yeah, I would actually think that it might be more on the lines of how SN 8 or 9 caused the explosions there. Very little fuel left, and I don't think we'd see the kind of damage that we saw with Flight 1.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just a big fireball, very minimal concrete damage, and like you said, that tower is really robust.
Yeah, and
Really
I
hoping we
think
get to see a shot from an aircraft too, like because we know that the NASA aircraft was out there at the time. It's currently out there circling somewhere, I believe. So I'm really hoping that we'll get to see a shot of it. Maybe it's still sitting there floating. That'd be cool.
Yeah, the all the post-launch artifacts that are going to come out of this flight are going to be very interesting to watch as well. Just want to make a quick note. We're about 32 minutes into the mission so far. If Elon's timeline on the restoration of the external cameras is on point, we should just be a couple of minutes away from those coming back in order. And we are also about 13 minutes away from Starship entry beginning. So,
gosh, it's gone fast.
A couple good milestones here. Stephen, if you're able to hear us, want to bring you back into the conversation. As Marcus was just alluding to, obviously you've got NASA assets out there very closely monitoring the progress of this mission so far. Given the fact that we did have a Raptor out at liftoff and one that was out during the boostback burn, clearly not an impediment to it hitting those milestones from just a visual analysis, but how do you think NASA is sort of digesting this information, especially in the Human Landing System office? All right,
muted maybe.
We may have lost Stephen here on the line. So I'll redirect that question to you, Marcus, then. Given that this is... Oh, hang on. Looks like Stephen is just working a quick audio issue on his end. Stephen?
Yeah, no problem.
Can you hear us now? Okay, he's going to be popping back in with us. So Marcus, I'll let you go ahead and go off on that one.
Just waiting to see if we get that acquisition of signal back for the for those external cameras. Not the acquisition of signal, to get the cameras boosted back up. It looks like Stephen's back.
Yes, looks like we have Stephen back. Stephen, can you hear us? All right, we'll continue to troubleshoot that on our back end here. Go ahead, Marcus, as we're waiting for visuals from SpaceX.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting watching the replay on that booster touchdown. It really did decelerate fast. Super quickly, actually. Faster than I would have expected, to be honest. Like, it was really, really, really quick.
Yeah, and Elon has tweeted out, successful soft landing of the Starship Superheavy rocket booster, which, we saw and expected, but it's nice to get confirmation that they consider it a success.
Thanks. I'll go unmuted.
We're still troubleshooting some audio issues on Stephen's end. Stephen, if you've got a clean signal, are you with us?
Yeah, Will, can you hear me?
Yes, okay. Got you back now, loud and clear. So, as we were just talking about, and I was teeing up for you to respond to, Marcus was saying that, of course, NASA's got its, aerial assets that are tracking the Starship launch today, and of course, representatives from the Human Landing System office are undoubtedly down in Starbase as well. Given the progress on the Superheavy booster that we saw, one of the Raptors out there, and another one during the boostback burn, even though that we were able to see what appeared to be good ascent and a good landing burn out in the Gulf, how do you think NASA and especially the Human Landing System office is viewing the launch so far, from your estimation?
I think they're pleased with the launch from what we've seen so far. Obviously, the engine out during the launch on the Superheavy booster is going to require some investigation. When I spoke with Lisa Watson-Morgan from the HLS program office, she mentioned one thing they wanted to see first and foremost was a good light of all 33 Raptor engines. And that's what the HLS program office wanted to see, was a good light of all 33 engines. We did see a good ignition of all 33 engines, and Superheavy obviously showed that it has an engine out capability, so they were able to achieve the targeted orbit with the Starship. It looked like the Starship actually burned its engines a few seconds longer than advertised in SpaceX's timeline, presumably to compensate for the performance shortfall on the booster.
Stephen,
But
sorry to...
all in all, I think the NASA program office is pretty happy with the results so far, but the big test is still to come.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I just want to note for our viewers that we are getting external camera views now back from SpaceX on the ship upper stage. As it continues on with its coast phase. Now T plus 37 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Just about 10 minutes now away from ship entry, and it looks like it's flying in a fairly stable orientation.
Yeah, this is the big thing. It seems to be stable.
Lab, bringing you back into the conversation. I mean, we saw quite a bit of major headspin if you were watching too closely on Flight 3, the rotation of the Earth beneath the ship upper stage last go around. Quite a difference between then and now, would you say?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Oh, gotcha. I was just saying from last time around, we saw the ship upper stage doing quite a bit of spinning as they were having some issues with the attitude control. It seems like fairly much night and day between that launch and this one with the stability of that, and the little watermark there at the top right hand corner views by Starlink. So seems like great improvement versus Flight 3. Would you say?
Oh yeah. It almost seemed flawless this time, other than that one engine that did light up.
Love the little cheeky bit of advertising there. Views by Starlink. I haven't seen any camera switches on this view now, so maybe they've only got one up and running. But I mean, that'll be enough if we can keep one camera. That'll be great.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that plasma again. That was the footage last flight was just amazing during the start of reentry.
Oh, absolutely.
Name keeps popping up.
I would have really loved to have seen just a few shots of some of the roll thrusters firing or something like that, because we haven't really seen that yet. We probably won't this time either, because it looks perfectly stable. I don't think they need to touch it.
And as we're looking at these external views of the Starship, obviously one of its fins, I'll open it up to the virtual room here, trying to identify which part of the ship we're looking at. For maybe Joel, if you want to chime in, if you can sort of give folks a better idea of which part of the vehicle that we're viewing at this point.
I think we're looking at the forward flap here, up on the nose of the vehicle.
Yeah, we'd certainly have a camera sitting there pointing upwards, because you can see from the diagram the ship's pointed upwards as well. So those little sort of pointy, metally looking sort of strake things that are coming off the fin there, they help with a bunch of aerodynamic things. But so that's the rear of that fin. So we're sort of looking angled upwards, and we would expect to see those fins moving around as we start to enter the atmosphere. And we're hopefully getting an animation of that here shortly. Or we are getting it right now.
Yeah, this is the animation.
Yep, so that camera should be located just behind that forward flap there on the right.
Yep, that looks right. And so this is what we're hopefully about to see in just the next 20 minutes.
I'll be ecstatic if it makes it through re-entry. Absolutely ecstatic, because that is honestly the biggest hurdle. That they would need to obviously inspect the heat shields, see how well it survived and all that sort of stuff. But if it can get through, that's amazing.
Yeah, and you were just talking about the survivability of it, and from this vantage point, you're seeing sort of the flat side of the tiles, a couple like right up near where the camera is positioned, and then extending out towards the flap itself. Marcus or Joel, if you want to weigh in on sort of the positioning of these particular tiles and sort of the orientation, which actually now we're getting sort of a far off view of what we're just looking at from another angle.
Yeah. So that's looking downwards, opposite direction, looking downwards at the aft fin. We sort of saw views from the third flight that, the entire ship was coming in, rear first, it was not ideal at all. So we're seeing good orientation. We're not seeing any spinning, no rotation that shouldn't be there. This is looking really, really smooth. So we should just see heat. We should see the black heat shield area start to heat up, start to have that orange glow around it, and we hopefully won't see any rotation, and hopefully those flaps are going to move back and forth to make sure that we can keep the orientation that we've got as it comes in, because we want to come in almost vertically. You're trying to wipe off, you're trying to hit the atmosphere face first, pretty much, and make sure that all of that is hitting the heat shield area. So that's what we expect to see. Hopefully we'll see a bit of glowing plasma here soon.
And
I can't see any missing heat tiles either, unless I'm mistaken.
Not from this vantage point. I was going to say it's gone off to the top of the screen now, but it looked like as we were seeing some great ground views that were passing by, I believe, the coast of the continent of Africa as the ship is continuing on its way.
You can really see from this viewpoint just how fast it is moving. Like, it is absolutely screaming along. 26,600 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, and I think on Flight 3 we saw the plasma right around just over 100 kilometers in altitude is where we started to see that plasma. Well, we're starting to see it right now, coming up right along the main part of the body. It's starting to get a little pink.
Oh, it's
not on the flaps yet.
Yep, it's building though.
Yes.
And that's where we want to see it, is we want that belly first.
That's looking beautiful already. I mean, at this point, there's not really a lot of drag, so it's not causing a lot of forces to sort of, try to fight the re-entry angle, all this sort of stuff. It's really just when we're going to get down to around, the 80 kilometer mark, that's when the controls of those fins are going to really be put to the test. And even more so as for each kilometer it drops, it's going to really make obvious whether there's a control issue. But man, it is smooth so far. Just look at that. Exactly where we want it to be.
It's interesting to even see that as this plasma is building up from the air pressure, the ship is actually still accelerating because it's still so high.
Unbelievable.
Also want to note, as we're watching these views of the ship upper stage, it's not the only important vehicle that is making its way in the heavens above. Right now, as we speak, we're T plus 22 hours, 44 minutes, 17 seconds and counting into the crewed flight of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. And within the last 30 minutes, they will have passed the go-no-go poll for the beginning of integrated operations with the International Space Station. They're in the process of getting into the rendezvous and docking point. Still quite a ways out, and about 15 or so minutes from the point which the crew needs to don their spacesuits again as they begin to make their final burns. But just want to note that there's quite a bit going on right now around our little
just
blue
look
marble.
at that. The fact that we're not seeing movements of those fins is a great sign.
I think that the video feed from space, is it still live or is it frozen? I don't.
Maybe frozen.
Oh, no. I think it's still live. It just, you can't see hardly anything moving. It doesn't look like it, but.
No, I just saw the fin move.
If you look at the hottest portion, you can kind of see the edge of that yellow white is slowly expanding.
Yeah.
Well, to
the fin's moving. I can see it.
There is motion on the fin.
Wow, this is incredible. It's almost like a stationary picture. It's so smooth.
I really thought it had frozen. That is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, look, now you're starting to get to see some.
And we are hearing.
I can't believe we're still getting such a great signal.
The flaps do have control of the vehicle, as we are seeing with these pictures. So our eyes do not, in fact, deceive us.
Look at that.
SpaceX is getting back, and look at the color on this part.
And if you notice, the vehicle is decelerating now.
Yep, dropping in altitude and decelerating.
You can sort of see how little drag there is, though. Like, the speed is not dropping that fast. It's only just a slight deceleration, and the altitude's dropping so fast. So we're going to start to see that speed really accelerate. It's going to really start decelerating fast. Look at it. Look at it.
So essentially, it's deceleration will accelerate, is what you're saying, right, Marcus?
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, very badly. We'll probably lose signal here because, I mean, this is going to get crazy.
Well, this
Well,
will
and
be a
that's
key test of the Starlink internet satellite service. I mean, there's a reason that they
Yeah.
put that watermark up there in the right-hand corner of the screen.
yeah. And
Is-
this
And what we
is
should see-
kind of the key thing is Starship is so big that SpaceX thinks there's a chance that the ship itself will deflect enough of that plasma around that they can still get that start. They think that they might have a
Yeah.
chance of getting that Starlink signal during this entire
And look-
process.
So far, so good, right? Like, I mean, look at that. It's beautifully clear. And see, what we should see the altitude drop slowing down now because we're angled very high. So this is going to actually generate a lot of lift. It's not going to go back up again, but it's going to generate enough lift to hopefully slow that fall so that they can just basically coast along the top of the atmosphere, hopefully. So 71 kilometers right now, and it's not dropping that fast, right? If you look back a minute ago, it was dropping faster than that. So it's actually got enough lift right now to keep its altitude almost stable. It's just dropped 1 more kilometer.
Well,
That
and we're
deceleration
Down
just
to
is
70.
really ramping up.
we're just about at the point a few kilometers away from where we lost telemetry data last time. So they're
Yeah.
about to pass an important milestone coming up in the next several minutes.
Yeah. It takes a long time to come through skimming along the atmosphere like this. So, we're now at 69, but look how much faster now we're dropping that speed.
Yeah, and as Stephen was telling me just off mic, we're experiencing peak heating here. That's what we're seeing.
Which this is what SpaceX wants of this test, is to get through peak heating. Everything past that is just gravy for them.
So we're down under 25. Just amazing.
We're about 10 minutes away from the point in which SpaceX was expecting Starship to reach a transonic state.
Oh, I'm just amazed. Absolutely mind-blowing.
And just still crystal clear pictures coming in through all of this.
Yeah,
Half a
just-
G of deceleration. They're trying to sort of keep it held reasonably low. So they're trying to keep that altitude sort of stable. Temperatures have stopped increasing, apparently.
Well, that's certainly good.
No. Down under 24. I mean, each 1,000 you drop actually, it makes a big difference.
This is exactly the data that SpaceX is desperate for. This is
Ah.
beautiful.
And in the meantime, also, Boeing's Starliner has established a direct link, verbal and data communications between Starliner spacecraft and the space station. It completed a 12-second inbound co-elliptical maneuver burn. So both of these two missions for two very important space companies, both Boeing and SpaceX, performing quite well simultaneously.
See how stable that altitude is. They're literally just enough lift to keep it where it is in the altitude, and they're just going to keep it here, decelerating until they probably can't hold it up anymore. Like we're now down under 23. As soon as they get through that real hot heating area, sort of regime, sort of altitude velocities, probably down somewhere around 18,000 or something like that, they can then probably afford to let it fall further down into the atmosphere to really start wiping the altitude off fast. Absolutely incredible.
It'll be real interesting to see what kind of data they got from those experimental tiles. Because if they're through peak heating, then they should know, have really great data now on what to expect from loss of tiles. And
we're not
like we
seeing,
said before, it's possible that that the ship failed in those locations and everything is still nominal because of where they located those experimental tiles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably just melted straight through that little part. Oh, it's good to get this view back again. Like everything there is looking to hold up really well.
Down to 67
We've dropped
kilometers
one
as
extra
well.
K. Yeah, just saw that. I think as soon as we get down under 20,000,
Raptor chill also now underway, so they're thermally conditioning the Raptor engines for that landing burn. So far things continue to move well with this mission, as we're now down to 65
getting
kilometers.
a lot more. Yeah, look at the speed dropping now, a bit faster. So just those extra couple of kilometers, we're down to 64. They're kind of letting it coming in a little quicker now. Not
And
quicker, but it's coming in thicker.
And while we do know this is obviously much better than the last flight, this is actually now lower too than when we lost telemetry of that suboptimal entry.
Yeah, I mean at this point the atmosphere is getting quite thick, and you can really see it starting to whip up around the outside there. It's interesting seeing some things can sort of almost float in this sort of almost shielded area and then zip off as soon as it looks like we're going to probably lose signal just because of the plasma, because it's really building now. Almost down to 60 kilometers. Well, we've got some fin movement.
Recall that Starship is still on a good trajectory.
I mean, the stresses on these fins is going to be crazy at this point. We're down under 20.
And it's worth noting too that where those fins meet the body is one of the areas that they're probably most concerned about, because there's a joint there, so there can't be quite as good of a seal with that heat shield. They've got overlapping heat shields, but if plasma were to find its way in there, it could cause some issues pretty quickly.
I mean, the heat shield is just holding up really nicely. There's lots of sort of, sparks and sort of little chunks of debris. I'm not sure where they're all coming from. It could just be part of the plasma. Yeah. It looks like there's some outgassing there, if I'm not mistaken, by the fin. I may be wrong. It could just be currents and stuff, but it just looks like something is leaking out there.
It does look like some out. Well, they're supposed to be under engine chill. That could be part of that.
We're down under 17. I mean, if this can get down around 15 quite happily, then it should be able to get all the way.
So far, so good.
Look how fast the speed is coming.
Ooh. I think that flap's going to fail soon.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
See, this is exactly what I was talking about.
It's melting.
That plasma is getting into that joint, and that flap is probably going to come ripping off that body pretty soon, and that'll be the end of this.
Well,
yeah, look at that. Wow.
Hopefully they keep the camera view on this.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep, it's going fast now. Once that got in there, it was only a matter of time.
Oh, yep. It's starting to
flap
pop up.
Is not going to.
Maybe got another few seconds.
I wonder if the other flaps are experiencing this similarly. I'm actually surprised
Still hanging
on
though.
As long as it has.
Jesus. It's almost transparent now.
You can see daylight through there too. It's crazy.
It's almost like it's glowing.
Now
It's just
now it's like
It's
a
just
span right
melting
now.
away.
I can't believe those connections are much more robust than I would have thought.
Well,
That
and
the whole
also
thing's just going to melt.
also worth noting that we have not lost views since this began. The Starlink
know.
signal is still holding strong.
Which makes me think that we're getting equal on both sides, because otherwise I would have think it would have started to tumble and we would have lost signal.
Shame that some particulates now on the camera.
Yeah. I mean, it's down under 12. It's down under what? 13,000. I mean, the heating's not going to be quite so bad at this point.
I wonder if they could switch back to the other camera view if we might see a little bit more
Ah.
that angle.
That'd be great. I think it's still attached.
I do too. I don't know how. But it's very interesting because if the graphics are still accurate and it's still in that same orientation, even with this flap failure like this, it's
Yeah.
very
I mean, it's
impressive.
still got the right orientation as far as I can tell.
Okay,
And, you know,
there we
we're
lost
well
signal.
down in now.
Maybe the flap hasn't been totally ripped off yet, and that's preserving. Well,
Oh,
that may be
come back. No,
They're
Still
still
getting
getting
data,
telemetry
still see the
data, though.
velocity.
Oh wow! No,
It's back.
we're still here.
Almost under 10,000.
And SpaceX has reached an hour now into this mission with an intact ship upper stage. Well, mostly intact.
There we go. Under 10,000. I can't believe that. I must still have control authority. Otherwise, the thing would be all over the place at this point.
So we are less than 3 minutes away from ship reaching transonic state.
Yeah, I mean, we're down under 9,000 now, 44 kilometers.
And the SpaceX commentator just noted that external temperatures are dropping. So if that flap managed to somehow hang on through all of this, it may keep its integrity intact.
I think it has.
There's a little hole there in the middle of the screen, and it looks like you can see just a piece of that flap. I really wish. I wonder if that other camera's just shot.
I think the lens also cracked too, which is not helping.
Yeah.
Look at that. I mean, it's now down under 7,000. I mean, that's what you want to see. Oof. Yeah, they're also assuming that the lens is cracked. Oh, just lost signal again.
As Stephen was noting off mic, they do have internal cameras inside ship upper stage, so certainly could have the option of taking a look and seeing what the plasma views are like inside ship.
Yeah. It's just past max pressure too.
So if all continues to go well,
we're still getting altitude and speed, so it's still alive.
The landing flip is coming up at T plus
1
hour, 5 minutes, and 38 seconds. So there may be hopes to see something.
3,000 kilometers per hour almost. You know, the diagram still shows it oriented the correct way.
If they actually try and flip and burn, I just don't even know what to think. The orientation is now changing. It's putting itself into a full belly flop.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder if maybe some of the flaps held up. Oh, it's overdoing it.
Up.
All right, well.
I mean, it's probably not surprising with half a fin there.
Oh, that was an interesting look right there. It looks like a lot of the fin is still there. I don't know quite what's giving us that view.
No, it's coming
Well-
back, man. It's coming back.
Over an hour, 3.5 minutes in, we're 2 minutes away
It's
from when
under
the flip is
under
supposed to
1,000
happen,
kph.
and now it's the orientation's shifting again.
Oh, look at that deceleration now.
Well, no. Got to call Starship a subsonic, and it is
Wow.
coming back up.
It is controlling itself. Oh,
The
We're starting to get
avionics
more camera
computer on
views.
this thing is very impressive.
This may be a photo
look at the
finish here,
speed drop.
gentlemen.
It's almost nothing now. It's just almost floating there.
We are just over a minute away from when the landing flip should begin if they're able to pull that off.
That the flap just actuated. How is
Yeah,
it
yeah,
still
it's
able
still-
to actuate?
You can see a lot of the flap. It's still
Unbelievable.
super intact.
Look at it. You can see just a huge chunk taken out of it, and it's still actuating.
That's incredible. Only 7 kilometers now from.
Starship is subsonic.
This is unbelievable.
Now less than a minute from the planned landing flip and then the landing burn.
5Ks.
Keep our eyes to the right-hand corner of the screen, see if those Raptors come back to life as well.
Yeah. 4Ks.
Now about 30 seconds away from the flip.
Come on, baby.
2 kilometers.
I don't know if we're going to get Raptor relight, like 1 kilometer.
Nope.
No,
I don't think we're going to.
that's. I'd say
Wait,
that's the end.
flipping.
What? No way. No way.
It is flipping.
No
I'm not
way.
seeing any engines though.
No.
Wait, that's brightness. That's brightness. That could be engines lighting.
Or the sun.
No freaking way.
Oh, well,
It's
It's
accelerate.
upright.
What?
It's upright and it's just done it.
I think it might have soft
Oh
touchdown.
my God. It just splashed down. It
And
just splashed
Oh
down.
my
it's
God.
still streaming video.
It's just floating there streaming video. Thank you very much.
I am flabbergasted.
Heard in the SpaceX commentary that the landing burn was initiated. We didn't see streams here, but let's listen into Dan Hote.
I mean, it was a little bit of use your imagination as you were going down with what we could actually see, but we were able to hear the ship did its landing burn. It sounded
Starship
like we
landing
might have
burn
got
shutdown.
2 engines. And there's the final call for landing burn shutdown, but we'll go back through all the data, but we did get confirmation that a landing burn took place. Starship made it through
That's
re-entry
crazy.
and did its first ever landing burn.
They've got to be stoked with that.
From South Texas to the other side of the earth, Starship is in the water.
Well, I wonder if all the flaps were like that.
What a
I
day.
can't believe that flap
What a
held
day,
on.
guys. Yeah. That was absolutely incredible. We we got views pretty much the whole way down. Analysis said it could do it. We weren't sure if it was going to be able to happen, but Starlink powered through, and we were able to get signal. We started to get some debris on the cameras and everything, but we were able to see it. So, I mean, what a day. Just recapping, everything started off today. We lifted off from here in Starbase just about an hour ago. It feels like a lifetime. Successful Superheavy ascent, boostback, and its own splashdown in the Gulf. Ship made it to space, kept its attitude. Successful re-entry through peak heating. We got to see it under flap control through the atmosphere, and we got call out of our first ever ship landing burn after a launch into space. So, just really incredible. So I'm going to take some time to collect myself, but wow, that was incredible. I can't wait for the next one. Over to you guys.
It was so loud here. I haven't heard.
And so, yeah, fellas, you know, we saw from liftoff to landing, and SpaceX just, you know, posted on social media that, you know, it confirmed splashdown. So this is truly a big leap forward for the Starship program. Lab, bringing you back in here, it made through quite some accomplishments if we've got Lab here, which we may not.
Just beyond incredible.
All right, go ahead, Lab. I think we've got you now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, man, these engineers and all these workers that put all this blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, they have to be grinning from ear to ear right now.
Yeah, truly.
I'm just lost for words. I don't even know what to say. It's far beyond what I expected to see. I was hoping it would make it through. I didn't think it would be able to land after seeing the destruction of the fin there.
I still can't believe it was functional.
I know. Like the heat shield must have held up really well, because any little deviate, like any part of the tank that got burnt through, that's mission over. It's impossible to light the engines when they're not pressurized correctly. So that means that the entire tank was still pressurized correctly. So there was no hole in it anywhere along the tank. Yeah, we saw the fins take a good beating. I'm sure that they'll investigate where the heat leaked through on that one. But I'm interested to see if that happened on all fins or whether it was just that one. Maybe we were seeing the one faulty one,
Well, one
Absolutely
thing,
incredible.
it's not quite confirmed that the tanks held up. The landing bird would have come from the header tanks, which are inside the nose. But I would think that if either of the main tanks failed, it would have blown the vehicle up.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason I say that is
propellants in
because,
there.
yeah, you do, to a degree, you still need pressure. I would assume that you would still need some pressure in the tanks for the vehicle to hold itself together properly without, maybe not. I mean, it is super reinforced. So
I would think with the residuals in there, if plasma burned through, those residuals would have ignited and the vehicle would have blown up.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty safe to say that the tanks held up. It'll be interesting. And, the payload bay must have held up as well, or those header tanks probably wouldn't have.
Yeah. Man, I need to go and just redigest that. I don't even know what to think. Like it, the most astounding thing to me is that we had perfect signal all the way through. Almost perfect signal. I don't think we saw many frame drops. We saw a couple of little losses of signal for, I don't know, 10 seconds at a time, but that was only twice. And who knows whether that was because maybe one of the feeds had cut out and they just needed to switch to another one, like it could have been that they still had a constant signal, maybe just not from the one camera, from the one dish, because there's multiple Starlink dishes on there. So yeah, that's astounding. And this is unprecedented stuff. We've never seen that before. We've never seen signals like that be able to pass right through re-entry.
Yeah, big day for all the engineers in the Starlink program, and certainly all the Starship engineers have to be just ecstatic right now. Stephen, if you're still with us, if you can hop in here. One of the things we were talking about at the early end of the Stephen, just checking you're still with us.
Yeah, well, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. Alrighty. Was gonna say, coming into this launch, the FAA, in their approval of the launch license modification to allow this mission to move forward, did note that there were, a few different contingencies under which this type of mission ending would qualify as just a part of the flight and would not necessitate another mishap investigation like we've seen in between flights or leading up to flights 2, 3, and 4. Based off your reporting and from what we've seen, obviously still early days, and they're going to have to double check everything. But it seems like this may have fallen under one of those contingency plans, and we may see Flight 5 before too much longer. The turnaround time may be much faster than between 3 and 4. Is that kind of how you're seeing it?
Yeah, well, that would be my assessment right now. I would be curious to know, by all indications, these two vehicles, the Superheavy and the ship, both splashed down where they were supposed to, but I would like to get confirmation of that to make sure there wasn't any debris or anything that fell outside of the designated zones, because that was one of the potential triggers for a mishap investigation. If anything fell outside of the designated recovery zone, either in the Gulf or the Indian Ocean, by all indications, everything was right on the money, right on track. So I suspect no mishap investigation, and that will drastically shorten time that the FAA needs to issue another launch license for the Flight 5 of Starship. I've already seen the ship for Flight 5 hot fired. I don't think we've seen the booster. Maybe somebody else can confirm that. We haven't seen the booster hot fired for Flight 5 yet, right?
Correct.
So I could see Flight 5 happening, in a couple of months, or maybe even less. We'll see.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see, like, as long as there's no sort of, anything at the pad damaged too severely that might take them a month or two to fix. It seemed like a very clean liftoff. We didn't see any debris flying anywhere. Even the chopsticks were sort of simulating the grab, so they were all operational, right? So that's a great sign right there that there's not much damage to any of those arms. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there'll be no mishap report. I can't see why there would be. Everything's gone almost perfectly as far as I can see, with the exception of a missing engine or two at certain points in the flight and a flap burning off, which frankly was expected. I can't really see many reasons why they'd need to delay much at all. They might want to reinforce some things, do some iterative design to make sure that the next one is supported better around the fins. Would be an obvious thing, and anything that they need to check to make sure that they can have a even more precisely targeted landing burn, some adjustments to address whatever was going on with those couple of engines maybe. And yeah, so look, it wouldn't surprise me if we were back here again in 2 months, maybe even less, like it depends what they need to do or what they want to do. There's no point sort of flying just for the sake of flying. If you're not going to improve the design and reinforce some new things, then, you got to wonder why they would do that. So I suspect there's going to be a reasonably decent chunk of time before the next flight, but certainly within a couple of months, it seems possible.
Well, and Marcus, just to a point you just mentioned, and thinking back to when we talked about it more in real time, when you said the chopsticks moved, as the booster was landing, was that just an animation? Or was there like video of the chopsticks back at the actual Mechazilla actually moving?
A couple of people had reported it from one of the other cams, I think.
Yeah, our Rover 2 cam caught the chopsticks moving during the booster landing.
Yeah, was it sort of synced up as far as you could tell? Like, it's a bit hard to say because each feed is sort of streamed slightly out of whack in terms of seconds, but it looked like that's what they were doing, which we were sort of hoping to see.
Yeah, I'm trying to jump around here and get a feel for the clock.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they were doing. Makes complete sense. We were sort of speculating on that earlier today. So it's a great sign because all the arms, the hydraulics, everything involved with that, they were all perfectly fine. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to perform that, and that would have been one of the big things they wanted to make sure of.
Yeah, they were moving between 7.5 and 8 minutes. It looks like after launch, which is right when the Superheavy was doing its soft splashdown.
Yeah. How about that? I feel like I've been totally ignoring the comment thread all this time. How's everybody feeling after that? Let's bring up the chats. 23,000 people here still, even after the stream is finished. And look at the messages coming through.
We've been pulling up the super chats down the lower corner of the screen, so making sure people get their on-camera due for supporting the village it's taken to make this live launch coverage come together. So certainly appreciative of all the people who've been commenting and supporting us, the new members on both channels. It is very much appreciated. And, while you're still here, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to both LabPadre as well as Spaceflight Now. We do similar, but if you want to pull a commercial crew program analogy, it's a similar, but it's a dissimilar redundancy, if you will. We both have great content on each channel, and it's worth subscribing to both, as well as to Marcus House, of course. We're all three doing a lot of interesting reporting and work here, covering the space beat and doing it all just slightly differently. So you'll get a little bit of a different flavor with each of these channels on YouTube, but definitely worth a watch.
Hey, thank you. It's always a real pleasure to be able to sort of, I mean, we sort of do sort of these summaries, I guess, of all the big things that happened each week. So it's sort of not too much content published all the time, and I think that's a nice mix, the way we do it. But yeah, I mean, there's second to none. Spaceflight Now, I quite constantly come to check out what your feeds are looking like from, especially Starship launches, Falcon 9 launches, things like this. Starship launches and Falcon 9 launches. It's really incredible the work you do. You picked up some great footage of the jellyfish plume a couple of weeks back, and it was just astounding. I don't think anyone else got the shot like that. So yeah, very, very cool. Love your work. Likewise, the work that goes into the cameras around Starbase from Lab, like, it's astounding. I don't think people really fully understand how much work it takes to keep those running and how much management is in behind the scenes, pointing cameras where action is going on. Like, these are big jobs taking a lot of time. And so yeah, look, any subscriptions to those guys, and any patron support, any funding, it's absolutely crucial so that we all get to see the views. I'm no different, so thank you everybody for supporting just everything here, because I mean, for me, this is one of those life-changing things for me. I mean, about 7 or 8 years ago when this whole thing started, to think that we would have had these outside views and wonderful people like Lab and various other providers out there having cameras pointing in, seeing all this evolve. These are real businesses that have made this happen. And we get to share this with the whole world, and the whole world gets to really be inspired by this. And I see it every day. So a lot of young people that are going into careers because of this, going into aerospace, they didn't know anything about this until it all came to be, and watching us all cover it. And that's the thing that inspires me the most, I think, so seeing everybody just so passionate about it. And it's a wonderful community. So thank you, everybody.
Well spoken, Marcus. And just want to note that Elon did send out another post on X saying, and I quote, despite loss of many tiles and a damaged flap, Starship made it all the way to a soft landing in the ocean. Congratulations, SpaceX team, on an epic achievement. So just doubling down on what SpaceX commentators had said and what they had also posted on their own X account, that, while we're very eager to see all the data and information that's going to come out of this and the learnings from it, the path forward to Flight 5, today seems like is certainly a day for celebration for the SpaceX family and also for NASA, as Starship is a key item in the poll for the tent that is the Artemis program, especially Artemis 3. And with that, we've done a lot of talking here. There's been a lot to cover, and we really appreciate, as Marcus was saying, all of the folks who have been with us for the gamut of what has been very robust live launch coverage across the LabPadre and Spaceflight Now channels. So want to give a sincere thank you to all of the members of both teams that have made this live launch coverage possible. Want to thank our guests here on the mic. First off, want to thank and say farewell to Joel. Joel, first off, appreciate you being with us this morning, and where can folks keep up with your work?
Yeah, thanks. Subscribe to LabPadre, watch our weekly update videos, and you can follow me on Twitter at WL_animal.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Can't wait to look forward to 5 and see what changes SpaceX makes between now and then.
Absolutely. Marcus House, you can find on his YouTube channel simply by searching Marcus House. But Marcus, thanks again for the kind words and for the insight and analysis. Besides the YouTube channel, where can folks follow you, and what have you got cooking in the hopper these days?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, you just Google my name basically, and you'll find me. I've got a YouTube channel there, and I've got an account on X. We've got 170 odd thousand followers there. So yeah, love interacting with everybody. But yeah, look, this has just been an absolutely incredible day. I'm not going to forget this one. I'll always remember being here on this live stream with you guys. This is one of those key moments where reusability has been essentially proven at this point. Like, this is something that that's never been done before. So thank you everybody for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the wonderful commentary, and Lab, Stephen, Joel, and of course Will. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely, it's been our pleasure as well. And rounding out the panel of commentators, Stephen. Of course, folks can find your work over on Ars Technica, alongside your colleague Eric Berger. Where else can folks find your work, and what do you have your eye on for this coming week? Obviously, we've got Starliner currently docking to the space station as we speak.
Yeah, well, the Starliner is going to be kind of a big focus for me over the next week or two, probably, as they dock with the ISS, and then the all-important return, reentry, and landing probably in New Mexico in a week or two. So I'll be monitoring that during the duration of the mission. That flight isn't over, still many milestones to come. But today, my colleague Eric is handling that for me, and I am here at Starbase over Starship by his shows.
We certainly appreciate you being with us again today, Stephen. And of course, one of the men of the hour, our friend Lab over the Lab of LabPadre. Always appreciate doing these live streams with you, my friend. Final thoughts as we wrap up our live coverage on Flight 4 of Starship.
Well, I think we're going to see another one very soon. It was almost 90 days from Flight 3 to Flight 4. And as y'all were speculating earlier, I could see one as soon as 60 days, as long as the FAA approves. We didn't really have any major mishaps. I can't wait to see another one. And, you know, I appreciate all of y'all for helping us out on the live stream today. Marcus, I can't wait to see you down here one day. One of these days.
Thank you. Yeah, look, we'll I think we need to make it over there for a catch. If they're gonna go for a catch in Flight 5 or 6, I think I've got to be there with you guys.
Right on. And I think Joel, I'll be seeing Joel here in October for Crowfest. And if we could get a Starship launch without any other launches interfering, we can get Will back in the house. And we usually have Stephen here by my side, as always. I appreciate all of you all here. It's been a pleasure. And as Will said, you know, subscribe to Spaceflight Now. Subscribe to Marcus House, follow Joel on Twitter, and of course, subscribe to LabPadre Space as well. We got Boca Brain also here next to us, giving us all the good intel. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with everybody today, and thank you all for the super chat and all the new memberships. It really helps to keep all of our equipment going out here.
And a big thank you as well to Lucid, member of the LabPadre team. Also want to thank a couple more folks on our side of the coin. Our photographers Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane, and our friend Chuck Briggs, all down there to track the mission. And we certainly appreciate the hard work of all of you guys and all of the members of both the LabPadre and the Spaceflight Now teams that made it happen. Most importantly, though, as Lewis was just saying there a second ago, thanks to you for watching at home or wherever you are around the world, whether you've been watching through the Spaceflight Now or the LabPadre side of this simulcast stream. You're the reason that we are able to do this. You and your channel membership help power and make this all possible here in Florida and there in Texas. So a sincere thank you to everyone for making weeks like this possible. Big launch coverage doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we are exceedingly grateful for your support and your kind words. And with that, that will do it for our live coverage of Flight 4 of SpaceX's Starship rocket. Of course, be sure to like whichever video you're watching right now. Subscribe to LabPadre Spaceflight Now, Marcus House, on your way out the digital door. Lots more coverage as we continue on in 2024. It is only June 6th, ladies and gentlemen. One last photo from Michael Kane, one of our photographers there on the ground of the ascent of this mission, and we will leave you with this image as we say goodbye. So for all of us here, for LabPadre, for Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. It's been a pleasure being your commentator, and folks, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Really good. And yeah, I'm pretty serious about that lab. We've been sort of planning on sort of heading there for the